Under the glow of a falling comet, ordinary boy John had no idea that very soon his world would be turned upside down. The city was ablaze with neon light, and he cut through the streets like an arrow on a red bike. Future superhumans have gathered on the roof of a metropolis. It's time to prove who is worthy of power. To enter, you need at least Blue Spirit, one of the 5 levels of power of the Chosen. There is laughter in the background. John only has white dust, the weakest and most humiliating power. The students laughed. Poor John fell in love with a beauty with a violet soul. How impudent. His heart was boiling. With the weakest strength, he was nothing. How then could he survive in this world? His attention was drawn to a comet that was rapidly approaching directly towards him. It fell directly on John, leaving his body mercilessly scattered among the debris. The comet turned out to be more than just a cosmic body. It contained a spirit awakening within. The comet gave him new abilities, greatly enhancing his power. John received the 4th level of power, becoming a bearer of royal blood. Waking up in the hospital, he felt that he had changed. His senses had sharpened, and his heart was beating in a new way. He had become completely different. Friends would visit John, unaware that he had changed. They would complain about the high cost of living and mention how his sister worked multiple jobs to pay the bills. The angry student held a letter from the school's queen. She reciprocated John's response. Now the danger lurked not only from monsters but also among humans. A year passed. Monsters attacked the city and John was still in a coma. The nurse rushed to save him without a moment's hesitation. But before the nurse had time to enter the ward, the insidious scum was already devouring her flesh. Suddenly, a miracle happened. John seemed to be reborn. He woke up, his body radiating radiance and rage burning in his eyes. Without hesitation, he rushed to the nurse's defense, and for the first time used his new power. The energy around him flared, stopping the monster in its tracks. She was scared to the core, but the danger had passed. John had saved her at the last moment. He sincerely thanked Sister Song for her invisible daily feat, for the warmth, care, and endurance she gave him while he was unconsciously between life and death. They concluded that the monsters mutated in the sewers, where something distorted their nature. They had to leave the clinic quickly and find the evacuees. Despite John's strength, it was too dangerous to stay here. The threat loomed at any moment. The corridors of the clinic were filled with monsters that roamed in the darkness, leaving nothing but blood and chaos in their wake. Fear enveloped everything around them like a fog, seeping into every corner of the building. John resolutely set out to clear the area of mutants, using all his new power to free every corner from danger. The monsters disappeared one by one, powerless before the hero's onslaught and his relentless energy. John angrily tossed the medication off the cart when the green liquid wrapped around his arm, amplifying his every movement and making his blows even more powerful. While in a coma, he trained mentally, honing his skills and preparing for future battles. Sun was shocked by the boy's abilities. Despite his high rank, John failed all the exams for unknown reasons. Cockroaches began to invade the city, spreading fear and panic among its residents. People screamed for help, realizing that salvation required a power beyond human capabilities. A man emerged from the darkness with a weapon in his hands, the master of Pyrocles, striking with his firepower. He relentlessly shot at the mutants with an endless stream of bullets, determined to destroy every animal without a trace. The battle continued. The monsters did not stop attacking, enveloping the battlefield in chaos and deadly danger. John and the nurse made their way out of the clinic, barely managing to get away from their pursuers, the remnants of the monsters who didn't want to let them go so easily. There was a bus with students on the bridge, and next to it was a mutated mouse, which a man with a pyromaniac was unsuccessfully fighting. John decided to take control of the situation, quickly learning all the intricacies of fighting a mutated rat. Everyone discouraged him from fighting. The mutated rat was too dangerous. But John couldn't back down. He had to protect those who had cared for him throughout his year in a coma. The monster attacked the bus with the students as if it were an ordinary toy, turning it over, tearing the metal to shreds, frightening everyone around with its cruel pleasure. John could no longer bear it. He had had enough of watching. With a burst of determination, he rushed forward and began to attack the mutated mouse. The enemy turned out to be huge and extremely powerful. His every movement made the ground tremble, and the air around him seemed to contract with tension. John knew that one stroke of the mouse could be fatal. Because of its incredible speed, he had to act with precision down to the second. He realized that he had to pull the mouse away from the bus to save the passengers. John began maneuvering, deliberately provoking it away from the people. A few precise, powerful blows, and the mutated mouse fell to the ground, powerless and motionless. But it was only a ruse. The mouse had pretended to be dead to distract him. Suddenly, it shuddered and rushed into the attack with renewed fury. John's strength was gradually fading, each movement becoming more and more difficult. The scum was of extremely high rank, and it was almost impossible to break it. The mutant didn't stop, pouncing on the boy again and again like a rabid beast. His blows became more and more ferocious, his eyes burning with madness. The mutated beast choked on its own poisonous saliva, bulging eyes, and lunged forward, as if in its death throes, eager to drag at least one enemy after it. People watched the burning battlefield with interest. The fire illuminated every movement, creating an atmosphere of both danger and hope. John increasingly used fire. This was the weak point of the demonic creature, which gradually lost strength under his fiery attacks. The boy's eyes burned with hatred, and his movements were precise and ruthless, like a sharpened sword that never misses. The crowd erupted in wild applause and exclamations of surprise. They had been saved by a student who had been in a coma for a long time and had now become their unexpected hero. John's beloved was stunned. She didn't know who had eliminated the demonic mouse, but she felt in her heart that it was he who deserved gratitude, and she dreamed of finding him. But the danger did not disappear. The infection was increasing, and it was urgent to evacuate the residents of Nancheng to save them from the imminent threat. The residents were evacuated, leaving behind superhumans and special equipment in the contaminated area. John's sister, unaware of his awakening, tried to get to her brother. She cried and begged to be saved, but her pleas went unanswered. The sister was ready to save him at any cost, even if it cost her life. John was enveloped in her arms. She finally saw him as she remembered him before she fell into a coma. The sister worked non-stop, day and night, with only one hope, that he would wake up. Even if it was in vain, she would still come to him until his old age. John sincerely thanked her for everything, for her care, strength, and the faith she maintained even when everyone else had given up. He woke up at home, in a familiar soft bed. A note from his sister gleamed on the table and a neatly prepared breakfast. Everything seemed so peaceful, almost unreal. John sat at the table in deep thought. He needed to find a way to earn money to improve the life of his sister, who had sacrificed everything for him. His gaze stopped at the TV screen, where it was announced that there was a monetary reward for the destruction of each type of monster. Without hesitation, John headed to the Hall of Rewards, a place where monster hunters gathered and chose their targets in exchange for a generous reward. After collecting all the information about him, John was taken to the training ground, where they tested the abilities of newcomers and prepared them for real battles. His superpower is super powerful punches. A robot tester appeared before him, designed to test the strength levels of new recruits. Directing all his strength at the robot, John concentrated and delivered a devastating blow. The metal body could not withstand it, scattering into fragments. His blow reached 1,000 kilograms, which was well above the threshold of 800, and struck the robot with incredible force. John set a new record. People were amazed and couldn't believe their eyes. The reward in the form of a card with funds was the first step towards change. John became interested in the available ranks. He sought to gain even greater rewards and improve his position. A clear plan matured in his head, to become the strongest in order to gain even greater wealth and ensure a better life. John was shocked to see the gathering of superhumans, all of them consumed by a thirst for power and rewards. They were actively looking for new team members, because fighting monsters alone was too dangerous. Others treated John with ridicule and distrust. After all, he was only a trainee at Starlight, and they perceived him as an inexperienced newcomer. Everyone was passionately discussing his low rank. To them, he was just a weak link, unworthy of even attention. But John had his own goal, to pay his sister's medical bills as quickly as possible and at the same time get a hand in destroying monsters, despite the ridicule from others. His teammates tried their best to dissuade John, saying that without a combat rank, destroying the scoundrels was too dangerous and pointless. Even his victory over the mutated mouse did not change the attitude of his former classmates. Instead of respect, they continued to mock him, as if this feat was a coincidence. But eventually, one of his friends reached out to him and offered to join their team, despite the ridicule of the others. Of course, not everyone was happy about John's appearance, but the group still hoped that he would be their lucky sign, an unexpected advantage in future battles. Since participation in field missions was mandatory, the squad decided to test themselves in clearing contaminated areas. John's heart sank at the thought of Catherine, his first love. But now she was head of the Lyceum Council and too high a rank for him. The students anxiously searched for the source of radiation that was slowly poisoning their home. Their lives and the future of the city depended on it. Only 3 types of monsters were known to lurk in the sewers, so it was there that they were looking for the source of the infection, the key to saving the city. It was because of this that the creatures began to emerge, endangering the peaceful inhabitants. John carefully considered the power of these creatures and realized that it was best to focus on fighting the mutated mouse, the most dangerous of them all. Like a bolt from the blue, a mutated larva suddenly fell nearby, a threat that overshadowed even the most peaceful moments. She looked extremely terrifying. Her every movement evoked a sense of fear and danger. John immediately set about eliminating the larva, but he knew well that these creatures live in pairs, so one must be constantly on the alert. The larvae struck true terror into the hearts of people, causing panic and chaos all around. The group moved towards a building with armored windows, the only place nearby that could protect them from the dangers outside. But at the last moment it became clear that Louise was missing. She had tripped and been left behind, right in the path of the predator. John smashed the hydrant, causing a powerful stream of water to flood the place and slow down the monsters. The jet of water hit with furious force, picking up the mutated larvae and sweeping them aside like debris in a stream. This gave them a chance for salvation. The water prevented the creatures from gathering together. The flow cut them apart and thwarted any attempt to form a dangerous mass. Louise was stunned. She could not have imagined that John possessed such devastating power. She saw the boy as more than just a friend. She fell in love, although his feelings remained indifferent. John returned with Louise, their eyes filled with gratitude and relief. They remembered how he had been the first to rush to the rescue, leaving the rest in doubt. Friends immediately began treating Louise's wounds. The larvae were particularly dangerous, as they could penetrate inside and infect organs. It was necessary to carefully inspect the building to prevent the remaining monsters from entering. After examining all the rooms, John stopped at the 9th vivarium. The glass was broken, and inside there was a strange emptiness that caused concern. He speculated that constant radiation could cause mutations among insects, changing them beyond recognition. John was still carefully examining the building, looking for possible ways the mutated larvae could have entered. At the end of the corridor, he saw a doctor calmly walking in isolation. This behavior seemed suspicious to him. But John was distracted by a call. A nurse playfully invited him to a restaurant, clearly hinting at something more. That answer only angered Sister Song. She was genuinely worried about his life and couldn't understand why he had gone to such a dangerous place. She insisted that there were not only the 3 known types of monsters in the infected zone, but also those that no one knew about. They were the ones that posed the greatest threat. John said he saw a doctor wandering the corridors by himself. Strange and suspicious behavior for a controlled area. Sister Sun added that last year the same doctor was behaving strangely, often going home early, being inattentive, and making mistakes during surgeries. Even after receiving the blood of the monster, John lost it. The creature remained dangerous due to its long, almost undetectable incubation period. And now, John understood the whole picture. It was the test tube that disappeared a year ago that caused the spread of radiation and the beginning of the infection. That's why the doctor constantly wanders the corridors trying to find the lost test tube, because he knows that people are dying because of his mistake, and he is afraid of being judged. Upon hearing this, Sister Song decided to immediately report the situation to the authorities to prevent further disaster. Despite the warnings of his friends, John decided to stop the doctor and stop the spread of the threat on his own. He walked through dark corridors, surrounded by clusters of mutated cockroaches that rustled around him, as if watching his every move. Finally, in one of the rooms, John noticed a doctor moving quietly, unaware of his presence. He followed him unnoticed, carefully following his every step in the dark corridors where mutated cockroaches swarmed around. He followed the doctor unnoticed, carefully following his every step in the dark corridors where mutated cockroaches swarmed around. John decided to descend into the abyss to take a closer look at what was hidden in the depths. At the end of the tunnel, the silhouette of the doctor emerged again, moving slowly in the darkness. He started to climb a tower, but John jumped up and shouted, making him stop. Furious, the boy shouted at the doctor, accusing him of hiding the missing test tube. It was the source of all the trouble. But he only lowered his gaze, silently admitting his guilt. The doctor tried to find the lost test tube himself, hoping to somehow make amends to those who suffered because of his mistake. He begged John for help, recognizing his strength. Only a superhuman like him could withstand the dangers of the search and stop what had spiraled out of control. The doctor admitted that he fears for his family. He is the sole caregiver and does not want the consequences of his mistake to affect his loved ones. Together they set out to the spot where the blood tube had disappeared. Examining every inch, they tried to figure out where it might have ended up after it disappeared. The doctor considered the monsters to be punishment for the sins of humanity: war, pollution, indifference. By draining the blood, he only hastened the cleansing. The doctor declared that humanity is like cancer cells destroying the earth, and only through purification will it be able to survive. He stubbornly argued that humanity is poison for the planet, and only destruction can save the world from complete decline. Dr. David said that humanity was a virus that should be destroyed. John realized something terrible. It was no longer the doctor, but a monster that had taken over his mind. According to David, the planet is fighting humanity like a virus, activating its immunity to cleanse itself of its harmful effects. Dr. David looked terrifying. There was no trace of pity in his eyes, even though hundreds had died because of him. His calmness was more frightening than any words. The doctor went crazy, calling people cancer cells and himself the doctor of the planet, who heals by destruction. It turned out to be terrible. It was he who created the radiation source, which caused mutations and the death of people. After the conversation, David came to his conclusion. John was the most dangerous enemy for his treatment, and it was him he decided to destroy first. The doctor planned to spread the infection through the water supply to imperceptibly poison the entire city and accelerate his cleansing plan. It sounded truly terrifying. Water was the foundation of life in the city, for food, for washing, for survival. If it was contaminated, every resident would suffer. The worst thing is that the contaminated water will get into the sewer and cause new mutations in cockroaches, rats, and larvae, which will again surface. Without wasting another minute, John decided to leave this eerie place. It was becoming more dangerous with every second. The doctor stared in amazement, expecting resistance. But John turned and walked away silently, leaving him alone with his madness. David frantically searched his pockets for the blood tube he needed to complete his plan. But it was gone, nowhere to be found. Panic began to grip him. Then he realized that this was John's plan, a cunning move that allowed the boy to draw blood unnoticed. Rage gripped him, tearing him apart from the inside. Without the test tube, all his efforts could have been for naught. The doctor suddenly turned into a rabid creature because he was conducting terrible experiments on himself. Unexpectedly, John was surrounded by mutated mice. Their distorted forms and aggression evidenced a terrifying change that made them extremely threatening. The creatures surrounded him, like a pack of hungry predators ready to tear their prey apart. John instantly entered the battle, using the stone armor technique, which gave him incredible strength and endurance in the face of enemies. The doctor felt the blood of the mutated mice pulsing in his veins, mixing with his own essence. The burning rage in his eyes spoke for itself. He was ready to do anything to deny John any chance of salvation. The boy pondered the power of the monster ranks and realized a mutated human is the most dangerous enemy, almost invincible in a direct confrontation. John decided not to involve his friends in the fight. He had to restrain the mutant on his own, at least buying some time before the authorities arrived. Meanwhile, the team gradually combed the streets, destroying the mutated larvae and containing the spread of the threat. The fight against mutated cockroaches was equally successful. The friends acted in a coordinated manner, leaving the creatures no chance. For the effective destruction of mutants, the team received generous rewards, which increased their rating and authority among other units. But despite the temporary success, the threat did not disappear. Somewhere in the shadows lurked a much more terrifying monster, capable of destroying everything in its path. A doctor emerged from the sewer hatch, completely disfigured by the mutation. His body no longer belonged to a human, and his eyes burned with rage and hatred. The Moonlight Group was already mentally dividing the reward for killing the monster, not even suspecting how deadly their opponent would prove to be. David, already fully imbued with the mutation, rushed to attack the young fighters. His movements were supernaturally fast, and his blows were dangerous like blades. By absorbing the lives of his victims, the doctor restored his own strength. Each loss from the team only made him stronger. People were stunned. The losses were catastrophic, leaving behind only pain and despair. The battle continued without stopping. Stopping this monster was the only hope for saving everyone around. One by one, the team members boldly attacked the doctor, trying to stop his uncontrolled rage. But people were dropping like flies, unable to withstand the brutal force of the distorted medic. He was like a rabid beast, cruel, ruthless, and full of bloodthirsty rage. David's main goal was to destroy John, the only one who could stand in the way of his terrible intentions. The Moonlight group was stunned. Before them stood a creature of unknown blood, whose strength frightened even experienced hunters. John pushed forward, trying to find shelter, at least temporarily, where neither the mutants nor the terrible doctor he had created could reach. His gaze fell on a nearby gas station. It seemed abandoned, but it could be a temporary shelter from the looming threat. The mutants were approaching, and John took a risk, doused himself with gasoline so that the smell would throw them off their trail. The smell of fuel confused the mutants, and they scattered. The guy quietly slipped into the dark corridor of the gas station, avoiding the noise. One monster spotted John, froze, and then charged forward through the debris. John realized he couldn't go unnoticed. The guy decided, to stop the pursuit, he needed to destroy the monster by hitting its developed lymphatic system. John realized that he didn't have the necessary items to activate the fist. He would have to fight barehanded. The creature proved to be incredibly strong, its lymph pulsating with danger. She lunged at John, knocking him off his feet with a powerful blow. The monster attacked with insane force, knocking the boy off balance and throwing him to the ground as if he were just an obstacle in the way. Despite the heavy blows, John held on and did not retreat, resolutely continuing the fight. The boy felt a new energy flare up within him, giving every movement strength and confidence. The monster fell powerless and defeated, and John won a brilliant victory that forever changed the course of the battle and opened a new page in his strength. Each fallen monster dealt a blow to the doctor, as mutated blood flowed through his veins. David followed John and came across a dead mutated mouse at the gas station. The trace of their struggle became obvious. He immediately sent other monsters to find the boy's trail. Seized with a burning rage, the doctor craved bloody revenge for all the losses and humiliations that had ruined his life and turned him into a dangerous creature. John jumped onto the roof of the car, feeling pain in his ribs. The mutants were still searching for him, scent-sniffing like predators. The boy's gaze fell on the scattered metal mechanisms. Something useful could be collected from them. He quickly began to select parts that could give him an advantage in battle. He decided to wash the gasoline off himself. The predators were already on the trail, and an extra spark could turn into a fire. Suddenly, a giant mutated rat emerged from the darkness. Ugly, with bulging eyes and a pair of fangs protruding from its mouth. The rat was charging at John furiously, its movements lightning fast, its attacks like wasp stings, sharp, painful, and deadly accurate. Each blow was aimed at vulnerable spots, as if the creature thought like a seasoned fighter. John was stunned by the attacker's fury, each blow knocking him off balance and forcing him to tense up even more. The predator began to lose speed, its movements becoming slower and slower, and this gave the boy an advantage in battle. John grabbed the support and climbed onto it, gaining a vantage point to destroy the monsters one by one. But to deal with enemies faster, John had to climb even higher. From there, his attacks became even more effective. He absorbed steel, which greatly enhanced his strength and gave him an advantage in combat. Under his powerful blows, the monsters fell like shaky dominoes, leaving behind only emptiness and silence. John felt a surge of strength and excitement at how powerful he had become. The monsters began to cunningly circumvent John, trying to catch him by surprise and attack from the rear. The battle did not subside. The creatures relentlessly stormed the boy, not giving him a moment of respite. But John only benefited from this. Each attack became a new chance for him not only to repel the attack, but also to deal a devastating blow to his enemies. He mercilessly crushed his enemies, leaving them no chance of escape. Despite his power, monsters still surrounded him from all sides, constantly threatening to trap him. John's fists, like iron claws, held the defenses firmly, preventing the enemies from breaking through. The bloodsuckers fell under the hero's blows one by one, receiving their deserved punishment. The battle did not subside. John continued to relentlessly destroy the enemies, giving them no chance of retreat or salvation. The creature's eyes burned with cold hatred and a blind thirst for revenge, intensifying their fierce cruelty. But John sought more and more steel to absorb its power. The metal dissolved in his palms, seeping into his body, strengthening his bones, strengthening his muscles. Only one remained, the last monster, looming over John, ready for the final blow. John approached slowly, the steel still steaming, his hands glowing a dull red from the absorbed energy. He felt this would be the decisive blow. The boy mustered every ounce of strength, every thought, and every crumb of strategy. His mind was working at its limit, calculating every step, every movement of the monster. He and the monster crashed down with a crash, breaking through the ceiling and raising clouds of dust. The predator lay motionless. John had won. Exhausted, with wounds all over his body, he stood over the fallen monster. Finally, silence. Sister Sun finally contacted John. Her voice was trembling, a mixture of anxiety, relief, and unspeakable fatigue. The news quickly reached the authorities. Now special forces are combing the area in search of the missing test tube, which could have caused the disaster. At the same time, special forces eliminate all remaining monsters to completely clear the area of the threat. John told the nurse that the doctor was planning a large-scale infection of the city through the water supply, which would cause an unprecedented mutation among the population. The hero has a missing test tube in his hands, the key to saving the city. He planned to give it to scientists to create antibodies and stop the mutation. John gave the nurse his location so they could pick him up. He knew he had a meeting with a doctor ahead of him, and he needed to stop him. The guy finally got on the trail of the mutated David. A dark corridor led him to the former doctor's home, where evil had taken on a terrifying form. He awaited John with a burning thirst for revenge, ready to destroy everything in his path. The doctor met the hero, showing off his friends chained to a terrifying attraction. He initially planned to destroy them, but suddenly changed his mind. His friends tried to dissuade him from fighting, reminding him that his opponent was a mutant with the rank of general. The doctor cruelly mocked, putting the hero before a choice, which of his friends he was ready to sacrifice, and which one to save. The tension between them was growing. Words were sharper than blades, and every step could be decisive in this struggle. John saw people as part of the great game of life, unlike the doctor who saw them as cancer cells without meaning or hope. Such pathos only caused David to smile mockingly. For him, the hero's words were an empty sound, not worth paying attention to. He harshly declared that superhumans are not salvation, but an even worse virus that infects the world and leads to its demise. In the end, the argument came to nothing. Words no longer mattered. They both understood. The truth belongs to those who stand the test of time. John demonstratively showed a tube of plasma and said that he would give it only if the doctor defeated him in battle. The hero provoked David with insults to throw him off balance and sow doubt and rage before the fight. The doctor threatened the lives of John's friends, but he remained cool-headed and ready to finish the confrontation. The doctor suddenly rushed at the students, leaving no doubt that it was time for battle. The frightened and defenseless students fell into despair, not knowing where to flee from the looming threat. With each passing minute, David became more violent. The destruction around him only grew. The doctor was determined. He ruthlessly sought to punish the students. A clear plan was maturing in David's head, how to eliminate John quickly and irrevocably. So he cunningly tried to lure the boy back, setting traps and provoking him emotionally so that he would lose his guard. The doctor was overcome with rage again. With his face twisted, he rushed at John like a predator that had lost control. David drew a circle, warning that John's exit would result in the deaths of the students, a cruel game of fear and time. The doctor's eyes lit up with blood-red flames. He saw John neither as a hero nor as a rival. For him, this was supposed to be a quick massacre, not a fight. David smiled mockingly, remembering how he had operated on the boy himself while he was in a coma. He considered himself the boy's creator, not his rival. The doctor humiliated John, calling him an accident and an unnecessary shadow in a world where only the strongest survive. The students begged the hero to escape, convincing him that he had no chance. His life was more important, and only he could reveal the truth about the world's doctor. David hit him in the stomach. John doubled over in pain, blood dripping down his clothes. Although his strength was failing, he held on with all his might. The guy continued to fight, even though he had crossed the line that the doctor forbade him to cross. David possessed incredible strength. His attack seemed impossible to defend against. Suddenly, John activated a hidden power. His fists ignited with plasma fire, cutting through space and forcing the doctor to retreat under the unexpected pressure. The boy's blows struck with such force that the air around him seemed to burst from their power. The injuries from the doctor only tempered John, giving him even greater determination and strength in battle. David lay motionless, the thorns glistening coldly on his lifeless body. The students were crying out desperately, their voices breaking the silence full of fear and hope. Meanwhile, David was pulling out the spikes. It was just an excuse. He was already preparing for the next round. Rising, he again found himself under John's crushing blows. The guy emitted a powerful stream of energy that mercilessly engulfed the doctor. But David's high rank made him almost invulnerable. The energy barely touched him. Although John could absorb the power of various objects, it was still not enough to win. The students confidently said that he was stronger than anyone else in the room and supported him, hoping that he would defeat the doctor. David undoubtedly considered himself stronger. His leadership rank prevailed, while John had only white dust, which, in his opinion, gave him no chance. The doctor was seething with rage, demonstrating his strength and confidently declaring his invincibility. He demonstrated a fist no weaker than John's, emphasizing his clear superiority in strength. The fight unfolded with furious force. The opponent's fists exploded like lightning, slicing through the air around them. The doctor's speed increased dramatically as he switched to close combat with his fists. The battle unfolded with furious force. Blows exploded like thunder, and John mobilized all his strength and agility to withstand the doctor's devastating attacks. The fight raged with incredible force. The boy unleashed every reserve, his blows were devastating, and his strength and agility exceeded all limits. He became a real storm that destroyed the doctor's attacks, and luck smiled on John. He skillfully repelled the enemy's attacks and gradually gained the upper hand. The doctor, with terrifying determination, pointed his weapon at the hero's friends, trying to break his spirit and force them to submit. John shouted to be stopped, but he himself crossed the forbidden line. This led to the death of a student, the first casualty of the struggle. John realized that he must now do everything he could to right the wrong. The boy, torn between pain and anger, felt the fire of revenge burning in his heart. The loss only hardened his determination to stop the doctor at all costs. The doctor coldly warned that there were only 5 minutes left to save the girl. Burning rage filled John as he lunged back with all his might. David smiled wickedly and contemptuously reminded John of his pitiful rank, claiming that he had no chance of even losing with dignity. The doctor cruelly reminded John of his suicide attempt, mocking his weakness and doubting that he would be able to see the matter through. He mocked John more and more harshly, dismissively calling him worthless and always would be, fueling his own rage with humiliation and insults. Memories of that ancient event fueled the doctor's thirst for revenge, making him even more obsessed and cruel. By reminding John of how his sister had humbly knelt down, begging not to kick his brother out of the hospital, David fueled his own hatred and desire to break the boy once and for all. Then the doctor raised his weapon, deciding to finish off the boy once and for all, without wasting any more energy on the fight. Enraged, David rushed to the attack, unleashing all his fury in every blow. John had failed again and inadvertently crossed the line drawn by the doctor. And that meant only one thing: another victim among the students that David had to ruthlessly take away. The boy feverishly justified his sister, remembering how she, like Nurse Sun, had not turned her back on him in the most difficult moments, when everyone else had already lost hope. He remembered how his classmates supported him, did everything they could to help him get back on his feet, and firmly decided that he would never abandon them, despite any danger. John emphasized that his status was much higher than that of an ordinary blue spirit. He emphasized that although David's body healed quickly, each of his blows left deep, indelible wounds, proof of his strength and vulnerability at the same time. Despite everything, John did not back down and continued to attack the doctor, embodying his determination and will to win in every blow. Although John's strength was insignificant, he still cherished the hope of victory. He froze for a moment, thinking about the doctor's words. Why did he mention the rank of a purple soul? Because the boy had never considered himself that strong. Then, casting aside his doubts, John resolutely rushed to save his teammates, focusing all his strength and will on their liberation. The injured Louise barely held on, unsure if she would be able to wait for help and get to the hospital alive. The students watched in admiration. John's strength impressed them more and more. Finally, authorities arrived to help, increasing the chances of ultimate rescue and control of the situation. They quickly rushed to examine the injured students, applying bandages and administering first aid to stabilize each one's condition. Authorities quietly discussed the mutated high-ranking doctor, fearfully admitting that he had disappeared in an unknown direction. The worst was avoided. The situation was stabilized. His gaze slid towards the abyss. There lay the remains of the defeated monster. The body was disintegrating, but the fear and horror it had caused remained alive in the air. Everyone was panicked. Who could kill a creature with such a high master rank? All eyes turned to John. It seemed very strange. He handed over a tube of blood plasma, describing in detail the threat posed by the mutated doctor and his insidious plan to infect the city. The authorities questioned John about how he managed to kill the monster. He answered simply, thanks to the strength of his fist. Despite his skills, John officially remained a trainee, which surprised the experienced ones. He defeated a high-level monster. The authorities recalled that the boy had failed his exams by ignoring advice over the radio, which only emphasized the unexpectedness of his victory over the monster. John began to be considered a hero. It was his courage and determination that saved the city from imminent disaster. The guy was offered to join a super-evolutionary organization, opening up new horizons and more difficult challenges. Later, he was officially invited to the official organization, recognizing his contribution to the victory over the monster. John had to face a difficult choice, which of the powerful organizations to choose, because each promised its own benefits and burden of responsibility. But the authorities were concerned about his condition. The hero was exhausted and had lost a lot of blood. It was announced on television that the operation to destroy the monsters had been completed successfully. Then it was announced that the most dangerous source of infection had been eliminated, and the main credit for this goes to John, whose intervention saved the city from disaster. The guy was exhausted to the point of exhaustion, and so exhausted that he slept in the hospital ward for 2 days in a row, gaining strength after everything he had experienced. Nurse Sun took care of John, and when he woke up, she announced that he had become a star. Journalists and the city were talking about his feat. The boy, waking up, asked about Louise. Nurse Sun explained that the girl was seriously injured, but was gradually recovering. The general came to John's chamber with a serious look to personally thank him and learn the details of the battle that saved the city. The military said that without John's determination, the city would have descended into chaos and hundreds of lives would have been lost, noting his coolness and courage. The girls left the chamber, leaving John alone with the tall guest who was about to discuss truly important matters with him. The soldier spoke about the hero's intelligence. After all, the mutated doctor was significantly superior to him in rank, and only thanks to his intelligence did he manage to win. But John stood his ground, saying it was just a happy coincidence, and nothing more. The general remembered the mutated doctor's words about humanity being like cancer cells, and admitted that there might be some truth to that. The discussion moved to space. On every planet lurks a deadly mutant that can destroy the lives of humanity. They discussed mutant instincts and their defenses. John realized the irony. The real poisoner of the universe was humanity, not mutants. He added that humanity is rapidly evolving, has superpowers, and adapts wonderfully. They are the ones who are able to resist monsters. The general said that the monsters were a real virus, destroying civilizations and forcing people to fight for survival in a continuous struggle. John promised to protect his people, for he is a superhuman, capable of standing guard over their lives even in the darkest times. The general revealed that the mysterious Divine Queen was an exploding comet that had put John in a coma, leaving him between life and death. The boy remembered how a bright light enveloped everything around him, flooding the space, and then the memory suddenly disappeared, as if time had stopped. The general assessed the disaster in the city as a Level 3 event, among the 12 most dangerous cases capable of undermining the stability of the entire system. David tried to raise the disaster level to 6 to increase the chaos, but John stopped him, preventing the destructive events from getting out of control. Kometa was classified as a Level 9 disaster. The scale of its consequences exceeded all expectations. 5 years ago, the world was nearly destroyed by an Imperial rank monster, a Level 8 catastrophe that left behind only ruins and fear. The monster's blood was secretly taken by a smuggler, hoping for a big profit. The plasma of this blood could threaten all of humanity, and the impact of the divine comet only increased the threat. That is why John's testimony was so important. So the general made an unexpected offer to join their secret organization, where John could use his abilities to the fullest and influence the fate of humanity. The general also suggested that John may harbor the abilities of a purple soul, a rare and powerful force that can change the course of battle. The hero decided to take his time and discuss the proposal with his sister to make a decision together. John brought a smile to the general's face as he remembered the reward that awaited him. After the conversation, the boy retreated into the shadows, plunging into deep meditation, seeking clarity and strength for the trials ahead. Blue light slowly filled the room, penetrating every corner. There was an incredible, almost mystical energy enveloping John. The same comet shone before him, cold, mysterious, and at the same time alluring, like a symbol of an unknown destiny. The mysterious girl who appeared in the comet's glow said she was rank 11. John stared at her coldly, unimpressed by the statement. She came to wipe out humanity, seeing it as a source of greed and destruction, resolutely executing punishment for human wrongdoing. The girl admitted that she had given John supernatural strength, opening the way for training in dreams to temper body and spirit. The goddess explained that there was a symbiosis between them. Her death would lead to John's death. She was disappointed because John's choice was an accident, not part of a plan. John noticed that although she was created for destruction, having entered him out of fear, she showed an instinct of self-defense, not aggression. The goddess admitted that symbiosis is a complex process, and it took the guy a year to make it possible. At the same time, she promised that they would try to live in harmony in the future. John unexpectedly suggested that she look at the universe through human eyes to prove that not everything in it is corrupt and worth destroying. The goddess insisted that John train harder. The master-level monster was just a fake. She suggested a more dangerous opponent for the real test, but the guy decided to rest a bit because he had already meditated and was filling himself with strength. And then it dawned on John. A nuclear catastrophe was hidden within him. This opened up new possibilities. He could defeat monsters of higher ranks. Finally, the guy was discharged from the hospital, but hundreds of journalists were waiting for him at the exit. He had to hide his face under a mask. Putting aside his fatigue, he raised his head and with a firm look declared that his goal was one, to do everything to protect each of them. John turned the attention of journalists to the rescue team, emphasizing that the real heroes are all the residents of the city who survived this nightmare together. The guy accepted the reward to provide for his sister and create a secure future for her, remaining an unsung hero in the shadows. Reaching his sister, who was selling ice cream, John invited her to the festival to distract himself and enjoy the simple joys of life together. The sister insisted that John study for the exams because they were showing the hero on TV, and she didn't even realize that it was her own brother. The phone call was the voice of a representative, persistently inviting John to join an organization with an important mission and new opportunities. John refused, explaining that he wanted to enroll in an evolutionary school, as his sister had dreamed of, and follow his own path without rushing. He added that he was ready to help the country at any time, because it was his duty, and suggested that they contact him if necessary. John finished the call, his fingers trembling. His sister said the ice cream was sold out, and his heart was pounding at the thought of the call. He got a high-paying job at an organization that gave him hope of providing for his sister and the dream of owning his own home instead of renting. The sister was delighted and suggested celebrating it at a seafood festival. They happily set off for the holiday, full of lightness. They enjoyed the aromas and tastes of the festival, laughed, experiencing new possibilities, and then walked around the shops, trying on dresses and suits. Even though the house was rented, John saw a future in it. His sister believed and hoped that everything would fall into place. The sister remembered the hero who saved the city and asked John, if he met him, to thank him for his courage and struggle. John listened and nodded, ironically thinking that he was the one who fought to the end. But he remained silent. People should believe in symbols. At night, John trained despite his fatigue. Cardio, punches, strength, and strategy tempered his body and spirit. The goddess reminded him of the mutated doctor's power, which John could now replicate in the Phantom. Rage burned. He yearned for strength, not to rely on chance. His body had to keep up with his mind and instinct. The solar energy opened the way to the absolute territory where he established the rules of battle. Talents gave him control of the elements, multi-hit star marks, and secret arts. But the path to them lay through pain, training, and relentless work on myself. A month passed. John said goodbye to his sister on the platform, his heart pounding, but his face was calm. He left for his exams, but his thoughts returned to the battles. A thick, almost red fog descended on the southern city of Bingshan. It seemed too heavy, as if it were dangerous to breathe. The police patrolling the city hesitated whether to proceed further. They wanted to turn back, but the road had changed. The fog had shifted the boundaries of the familiar. Their steps had slowed. Their hearts had beaten faster. A sound appeared in the air, a soft whisper for help that grew into a moan. Out of the darkness, a hideous creature with tentacles, dozens of eyes, and sharp teeth emerged. It resembled a spider, but was more terrifying, holding a second policeman in its claws. The second policeman ran to the control room, picked up the phone with trembling hands, and anxiously begged the ministry to come quickly. The city had become dangerous. In the shadows behind him, a goddess appeared. Cold, evil, with the body of a jellyfish and sharp tentacles that instantly killed the policeman. Meanwhile, John told his sister that he already had enough money and asked his friends to help him find a new home. The heat forced passengers to ask for a bottle of water, while the train rolled towards the southern city. The attention was on the girl from Lanyang, a record holder who had entered the Southern School of Evolution. The boy nearby asked the girl for a blessing, dreaming of becoming the hero of the town. Suddenly, the train shuddered and derailed. The metal body swayed so much that people fell out of their seats. The baby, sitting on its mother's lap, could have crashed, but John managed to catch it. The movements were so fast that they seemed unreal. The sun disappeared outside the window, the fog grew stronger, communication was lost, and panic gripped the carriage. Someone saw the vague silhouette of a large creature. Someone laughed, but John seriously knew, sometimes fears really do come true. The voice over the speakers ordered him to wait, but John was worried. Passivity was dangerous. He wanted to know what had happened, but the guide asked him not to disturb her. However, after hearing about his skills as a hunter, she changed her mind. The girl with the highest scores joined the conversation. She also had the title of a student of the School of Advanced Evolution. The guide led them to the senior guide. At first, he couldn't believe that these two young people could help. But there was no time for doubt. They showed their badges, even though they were only interns. John asked the girl to stay. He knew there was danger outside, but despite her fear and determination, she refused. They agreed that if they didn't return, the door would remain closed. No one was to open it, no matter what. As soon as they got off the train, a hostile fog enveloped them. The world disappeared, leaving only fears and an invisible enemy nearby. The group was lively discussing what could have caused the train's sudden stop. They suspected either a technical failure or the activation of an emergency safety system. John hurried, trying to prevent the worst. The technical details were in his head. The train wouldn't stop in fog for no apparent reason. The conductor mentioned birds and wild boars breaking through the tracks. For the crew, this was familiar and not surprising. A blurred figure of a girl appeared in the fog. Fragile, but a dark cloud with an eerie smell was escaping from her mouth. The guide, forgetting about the prohibition, approached the door. She felt sorry for the one outside, as if she was asking for help. The passengers were indignant. Why not let the frightened girl in? One man pushed the conductor and opened the door himself. The girl smiled, her smile filled with emptiness. Suddenly, tentacles shot out from her and engulfed the man in darkness. The guide froze in horror. The conversation about the girl with the highest scores, the only hope for salvation, fled in her memory. Evil approached. Tentacles grabbed the guide. She struggled, but the darkness swallowed her too. Passengers argued with the conductors. Fear and impatience grew. Some called for the missing conductor, others blamed the crew. John and the high-scoring girl looked for the reason why the train had stopped, but the slippery ground did not explain the stoppage. He mentioned the nets, the lack of rain, and the cleared slopes. The landslide couldn't stop the train. John looked up and saw footprints stretching into the mist. Huge, heavy, as if left by a creature they couldn't even imagine in their nightmares. John was examining the large footprints in the wet ground when his phone vibrated and Luna appeared on the screen. She was happy about the call, saying that the tag was moving towards Nandu Xiaopei, where the boy was going. But fog and communication failures stopped the connection. He told her that the train was still standing and the crew was looking for a way to clear the tracks. The fog was gripping them like a trap, and the connection was disappearing and reappearing in fragments. Lu ordered him to start the train immediately and get everyone out of the danger zone as soon as he had the chance. Her voice was steely, a cold determination that left no room for doubt. John asked what had happened there. Luna replied curtly, "They were near the very center of the fog. There could be serious problems there, so it was better to leave now." John rushed to the guide, reproaching him for just waiting. He remembered that among the missing was the best student from an elite school, and the crew was still doing nothing. John explained that he had received a call from the command center. "We must immediately escape from this area." He explained that there is sometimes a weak signal on the slopes, and told about the fresh tracks of a large beast, the likely culprit of the collapse. John recognized the fog as a great threat and insisted on evacuation. The girl remembered her mother, and he promised to leave after the path was cleared. The guide screamed, clutched his face, and fell. His lifeless friend, without an eye, stood before him. He was dumbly frightened. John and the girl had barely regained consciousness when they were attacked by a tentacled demon. Panic grew. He ordered them to hide and repelled the attack. The girl bravely entered the battle, knowing that John was just a trainee, no stronger than her. She was annoyed that he was holding her back. The demon's tentacles rushed towards Emily, but she waited calmly and delivered a precise blow, like a honed weapon. John gritted his teeth and struck like a sledgehammer. His strength surprised even Emily. He didn't seem like a mere intern. The demoness staggered from the unexpected blow, but quickly regained her balance and launched a fierce counterattack, weaving her tentacles like steel whips. The fight continued, the monster acting with a plan. Tentacles were distracted, and eyes followed John and Emily, looking for the moment to strike. John was punching, his eyes burning blue with rage. Emily didn't have time to follow his rapid blows. The demon disintegrated, its tentacles spread, but John noticed the conductor inside, unconscious but alive. He pulled out the guide, who had woken up and felt as if she were drowning. The demon, entangled in entrails, crawled into the mist, hiding her defeat. Emily turned away from the girl in the black slime, and John immediately began performing CPR on her, saving her life. The guide's heart was stopping, but she took a hoarse breath, as if she had escaped from an abyss. The guide ran up and shouted what had happened and where the monster was. The girl spat out the liquid, barely able to say a word. Another conductor ordered them to urgently return to the carriages and close the doors until they were completely engulfed in fog. The train roared off, cutting through a white wall of fog, but only traveled part of the way. Chaos awaited ahead, the traces of an old meteorite and a place where everything disappeared into pitch darkness. A month ago, a meteorite fell in the forests of Nandao, bringing with it an ominous mist. Although astronomers saw no life, the crater was filled with terrifying beasts, as if the earth had awakened from a terrible dream. The fog moved erratically, but always around the mountain, where dangerous creatures appeared. When it dissipated, they disappeared without a trace. Eyewitnesses saw beasts so powerful that some could have been emperor-class in the thickets of mist. Those who entered seemed to enter another world and never return. The phone screen flashed a photo of a giant centipede, a former laboratory specimen that had escaped into the caves near the Hetian industrial zone. The explorers were unable to extract her from the dungeon and gave up trying. Now she is the only creature surviving in the heart of the mist. The centipede changed places, and scientists immediately notified the authorities. It could be the key to solving the deadly fog. The official admitted that nothing was known about the depths of the fog, only about external events. Suddenly, a noise filled the forest, and it fell silent. A huge centipede crawled onto the lawn and pounced on an experimental pig, demonstrating how the fog had turned it into a monster. The train arrived at its final station. The conductors were relieved to look at John with respect, knowing that thanks to him they had survived. In the eyes of his colleagues, he became a hero, but the guy considered the conductor, who protected the passengers despite her fatigue, to be the real heroine. John thought it was unfair that fame could bypass true courage. His colleagues believed that the leader would definitely receive recognition. John had not yet left his thoughts when he received a call from an unknown person. It was Catherine, a former girlfriend close to him. She found out that the guy was in the south now and suggested they meet. He agreed. They agreed to meet near the Southern School of Evolution. John caught a yellow taxi and soon found himself at the entrance to a huge building, striking in its scale. A memory from a year ago flashed through John's mind. Catherine with the bouquet he had given her, her eyes full of hope. She asked for time, and a year of silence passed, which John took as a refusal. But despite this, he could not help but come to this meeting. Meanwhile, rumors were spreading among the school's students about a student who had been in a coma for a long time and had finally woken up. Catherine recalled that she had once sent him a letter with a promise that could change his fate. Her friend joked that she felt sorry for the guy and wanted to push him forward. She didn't understand why he still remembered old feelings. Within a year, Catherine had become the school idol, smart and strong. She felt it was unfair to refuse the man who had once set her heart on fire. Her friend convinced her that nothing would work out because the guy was ordinary and weak among a big city of geniuses. But Catherine decided to meet him to see for herself. John first stepped foot into the Southern School of Evolution and was struck by its scale. The students looked down on him, considering him a country boy. Yet everyone's attention was instantly drawn to Catherine, who approached John. Her presence made even the most confident man sigh in admiration. They went to a coffee shop near the school, leaving behind the whispers and jealousy. For the boy, it was a chance to find out if there was anything real between them. Catherine offered John coffee to relieve his fatigue. He felt the good person card in his pocket, her gift from a year ago, a reminder of him. She believed that a real couple held hands, but it had to start with him. If not, it was fine to remain friends, just like in the warm days of school. John noticed that people around him seemed to already know who Catherine was. He had heard that she was a real star here, and now he had seen it with his own eyes. Catherine shrugged slightly, explaining that she had simply shown up to the meetings a few times. Her calmness reassured the boy a little, but he still felt a little nervous. The hero's dream of getting into the School of Evolution has not disappeared. He has come to try again and see the largest city in the South. When she asked where he was staying, John shrugged. He hadn't found a place to stay yet. He wanted to get used to it a bit, see the city, and only then gradually try out different programs and take exams. Catherine awkwardly offered to help find programs so they could study together again. John remembered the library meetings and felt hopeful, even though the thought of her boyfriend pricked him. The girl turned the conversation to the fog he had passed through. John remembered a creature with pale silver skin and tentacles that appeared in the mist. Catherine shuddered at the thought of this danger. But John reassured her by reminding her of his Evolution Hunter card, earned after months of training. He was determined not to break his promise to study together and pass the exam. Catherine realized that John remembered her, and it touched her. Suddenly, Fan Kai approached them with a look of cold superiority. He reminded them that entry required the rank of Moonlight, not Starlight. His words were sharp and demeaning. Kai was even ashamed to call John a friend. The air smelled of the tension that had suddenly thickened between them. Kai reproachfully asked Catherine why she hadn't warned him about John's arrival. They said they could have gathered all the classmates and arranged a meeting. Catherine decided that noisy company was inappropriate and wanted to talk to John calmly. He hinted to Kai that they had their own topics without outsiders. An angry Kai turned away sharply, his jaw clenched. Catherine quietly asked them not to argue and hid her excitement by listening to the phone. Kai left, leaving his badge on the table, his thoughts racing behind him. He seethed with anger, calling John a vile toad. Kai was offended. How dare John come to the School of Evolution? He believed that only he should be next to Catherine, the city star and his pride. Catherine said into the phone that she was waiting in the cafe, excused herself, and left. John nodded. She promised to come to the exam, and they parted ways. Catherine met her brother, who said she needed her lightning power and promised to explain on the way. At the special recruitment area, John heard that the official exams had long since ended. He was surprised to see so many applicants. Every year, they recruit those who have failed the main exam, mostly children of rich or influential families. The boy joined the student, who greeted him in a friendly manner. The student immediately noticed John's modest clothing and asked if he bought everything at a cheap store. Robert brazenly said that his family had donated $7 million to the school for the spot. He had come to watch rather than actually compete. The new friend admitted that everyone here is for money, not ability. John understood. The exams are just a formality for the rich to get around the rules. The student advised saving up a few million by next year, then everything would be resolved. John nodded curtly, remaining calm. Suddenly, a curator named Yang Jin entered the room, along with his assistants. He introduced himself and began to announce the rules. He read all the names except John, and the student next to him noticed. The curator explained that there was a separate page for John because he had been officially recommended. The curator announced 5 rounds, 4 physical and 1 fight, explaining that everyone should show their strength according to their talent. John was called first because his talent was of the explosive type. He had to knock out over 1.5 tons to pass. John remembered that a similar test was conducted at the Hunting Association. Last time, the result was exactly 1 ton. He gathered all his strength and hit the mannequin, and a gasp of surprise filled the room. The blow was so strong that the mannequin cracked. The numbers on the scoreboard froze at over 2 tons. The curator announced that John had exceeded the standard, and the first test had been passed. Because of the broken mannequin, everyone was let through without being checked. John felt confident that this time he would not back down, despite those who had bought themselves a chance. The curator's assistants noticed John's talent and wanted to give him a chance. But the curator reminded them that there were not enough places, so even the best had to be rejected. They agreed. The school has enough strength, but without experience, John risks getting killed. The curator emphasized that without the Mendacia rating, he would not have been admitted. They decided to make the test harder to weed out John. Next was a speed test, running and dodging a regular ranked red leopard across a large field. Those who were caught by the leopard in time were doomed to defeat. The curator ordered the trainer to first provoke the beast into John and to be gentler with the others. The leopard suddenly lunged at John's friend, who barely dodged and scored 700 points. The next animal attacked another participant, but he knocked it down. John watched and thought that a leopard of ordinary rank should not pose a problem, and he should be able to handle it. At that moment, the trainer made the beast sign, indicating the real target. The leopard lunged at John with fury, giving him a bad feeling. The beast attacked so furiously that its claws cut through the air. John was surprised by the leopard's sudden aggression and realized that the ordeal had become a real race for survival. The guy distracted the leopard by leading it into the crowd and turning on the phone. But even among the people, the beast didn't lag behind a step. He remembered all the training and rushed forward, so quickly that only a blurred shadow remained in the eyes of the spectators. The curator silently watched John cross the finish line without stopping. One of the assistants quietly said that they would have to come up with something special for him. There was still 15 minutes of running ahead. After 10 minutes, the leopard became noticeably tired and began to slow down. John saw this and did not stop, but only accelerated, ready now to chase the beast himself. The leopard flinched, not expecting such brazen confidence. They raced across the field again, changing places in a frantic run. The curator watched in amazement as John kept his strength up and kept pushing. Another 15 minutes passed and the leopard looked exhausted. John, on the other hand, was just warming up and ready to run on. The trainer barely managed to persuade the boy to stop to take pity on the exhausted beast. In the end, the curator admitted that no one had been caught, so everyone moved on. John was not surprised by this result and was pleased with himself. Next up was the third round, a reaction test. The curatorial assistants agreed. Despite the patron's selection, John deserves a place. His abilities are too obvious to ignore. The curator coldly emphasized that money is everything at school and talent is nothing. But there was already something more in his voice, evoked by John. The assistants asked about the available quotas, even though all the places were taken. One patron reported the child's withdrawal and offered money as compensation. The curator strictly ordered John to fail. The third stage began. A reaction test, where a radioactive demonic tree with ominous energy stood in the middle of the field. The tree had already been cut down and could not kill, but it remained dangerous. A drop of fresh blood was enough and it came to life, furiously attacking everything around it. The assistant curator cut his finger, blood fell on the wood, and his eyes flashed with green fire. Those who passed the test were allowed to move to the blue zone, while those who were summoned were in the yellow zone, where things got even more serious. The tree began its attack, but at first glance it didn't seem very fast. One of the students dodged it with ease, boasting that it was easy. A few minutes passed, and the participants took turns taking the test, risking a cut on their finger. John felt that it was all too easy to be a real test. The curator coldly ordered his assistant to cut more. The blood that was absorbing the tree made it more and more furious. The tree became a monster with green fiery eyes and rushed at John. The attacks were strong, but he remained calm. The bullets did not reach him, so the tree did not stand a chance. The curator reprimanded the assistant for being too slow, and the assistant decided to act more harshly. Blood flowed again. The tree grew larger and filled with even more malice. The beast tree attacked John again, and he closed his eyes, training his reaction only by hearing. The students were amazed to see the blows pass him by. Some wondered why the tree didn't just hit him, but no one responded to the curator's remark. John used a special technique, and a tense battle ensued between them. His reaction surprised everyone, even the curator, who found it unheard of. John was pleased with the challenge and the result. The assistant curator praised John for brilliantly passing the 3 tests and called him a genius. But the curator coldly replied that they already had many such geniuses. Then it was time for the next test. Meanwhile, in the medical office, the doctor was scolding his assistant for risking his life by feeding the tree too generously with blood. The assistant apologized for the excessiveness of the special exam, and the doctor advised to take more care of his health and avoid such risks. He promised not to repeat it, but it was clear that the situation was out of control. The exam continued, and new challenges awaited him. The last test seemed simple, a scan without combat, but was actually the most dangerous, ruthlessly determining the true rank of a superhuman. John was said to have a talent as pure and white as untouched snow. It seemed more logical to start with this test than to leave it until the end. The thought that failure would destroy all previous successes was heartbreaking. The rules were strict. There were no exceptions. A few brave souls objected, but were coldly rejected. John felt the tension as the first participant, his friend, stepped forward. The scanner coldly showed the result: a purple soul. All the other participants, as if by agreement, had a purple soul. Only John felt the watchful eye of an observer who had not forgotten his failure last summer. Then the boy failed this very test, despite his perfect scores on the theory. The words that the power of white smoke had no combat value flashed through his memory. The observer sternly emphasized, "Knowledge will not help without real superpower." The main lesson of the university is that superpower can be changed. It was about the so-called drops of life, obtained from the bodies of the ills, which allowed to change the soul. A white, blue, or even purple rank could be obtained with money and influence. So now it became clear why everyone present had a purple soul. John clenched his fists, realizing the essence of this game. He was reminded that even physical achievements were worthless without the necessary soul. The purple rank was the only way forward. The real power of superpowers surpassed physical strength, speed, and reaction, capable of unleashing lightning, destroying cities, and turning the owner into a weapon. Even the best training paled in comparison to such power. But John believed that the combination of training and superpower would make him even stronger. There was malicious speculation among the crowd that he would only receive a blue soul. Some mentioned his health problems and believed that he should still be in the hospital. But when the scanner showed his result, the tension suddenly reached its peak. The words, "purple soul," appeared on the screen. There was a real shock in the room, because by all accounts John should have had a white smoke. But someone quietly reminded him that it was possible to change the power, and there was nothing supernatural about it. The observer had to admit that hiding one's true power was a wise move. After all, it was the first rule of those who sought to survive in a world where power ruled. In the end, everyone got a purple soul, so the results were as high as possible. John was also included in the list of chosen ones, but the peace didn't last long because there was one more stage ahead, a combat test. And then a new figure appeared on the horizon. An older student entered the room, offering his help in conducting the fight. His name was Fan Kai, and he had ranked 3rd last year. The mentor remembered his efforts and training, admitting that it would be difficult for newcomers to compete with him. But the severity of the selection left no choice. Everyone had to be tested without exception. Fan Kai calmly reminded them that he was currently ranked 10th among the sophomores, making him the perfect opponent to test the strength of the newcomers. And the mentor agreed. That would be fair. A battle awaited them ahead, which was to put everything in its place. The battle arena gathered a large crowd of spectators, as this fight was of interest to everyone. Students from different schools rushed to take their seats so as not to miss the main action. John's opponent was Fan Kai, one of the strongest on the course with character and powerful superpower. The fight was official and open, without any violations. The old acquaintance looked at John with a cold sneer, and the crowd cheered him on. Kai openly despised and provoked, recalling their old enmity. He considered John trash and wouldn't let him look at Catherine. His confidence and sharp words cut through the air. For Kai, the fight was a chance to humiliate John and make him beg for mercy. His voice was filled with anger and a desire to prove his superiority. He remembered how he had hated the boy since school, and now he wanted revenge for all the insults. Old insults came to life in every movement, every gesture, fueling his rage. John silently listened to the accusations of jealousy and ruining relationships, while Fan Kai raged with his own words, justifying himself to everyone. He mocked John's past, his construction job, laughed at him for daring to come here. There was no doubt in his words. John was a nobody, unworthy of being here. A stubbornness born of pain and struggle burned in John's heart. He remembered how he had no money for treatment, and now this fight was a chance to prove something, first and foremost to himself. The crowd froze as Fan Kai boldly announced that he was the examiner here. He was going to make the boy fall to his knees and beg for mercy. But in response, John clenched his fists, preparing to accept the challenge he had been waiting for. A determination flashed in his eyes. Now was the time to settle the score. Fan Kai exploded with second-stage acceleration, boldly displaying his superiority. His movements were so fast that they became almost invisible. He laughed, certain that John wouldn't even be able to reach him. Confidence oozed from every word. What could ordinary fists be worth against his speed and super strength? The crowd froze in anticipation of the first blow. And a tension hung over the arena, about to burst into the explosion of a real battle. The crowd trembled as Fan Kai activated his Storm Breath Tornado, His fury raged like fire, and every move caused the wind to rip the arena apart. John calmly faced this fury, like an observer in the midst of a storm. From within his palm, a spiritual technique was born that could absorb other people's power. The crowd could not believe it. A boy who was not accepted into school had stopped one of the strongest. Despair boiled in Fan Kai's soul. His advantage had disappeared before his eyes. Even Master Yang's call could not restore the balance. Everyone could see that John had not yet shown his true strength, and Fan Kai had exhausted everything he had. Fan Kai raged, his attacks quickening, but his rage turned to impotent anger. His attacks crashed against John's unyielding defenses like a wave against a rock. At the decisive moment, the arena shook with an explosion of energy. But when the dust settled, everyone saw it was John who stood firm. Some whispered about spiritual techniques, some about John's true rank. Everyone realized that this guy had much more in his hands than they had ever seen. Fan Kai, stunned, couldn't believe he had lost to someone who hadn't even used his secret technique. His pride was shattered, leaving only the bitter taste of defeat. There were whispers about whether he deserved a place among the strongest. But John remained calm, his gaze neither angry nor proud, only confident. Teacher Yang finally recognized John's strength and accepted him into the school. While his rival, beaten and devastated, could do nothing but swallow the bitterness of his defeat. Friends and foes quickly surrounded the new student, each with their own intentions. But an old acquaintance resolutely took on the role of his guide, preventing others from getting close. John was silent, but his silence seemed louder than any words. It held the promise of new victories and challenges. A moment later, someone joked. Someone tried to shake hands, but the tension did not dissipate. Everyone understood. Someone capable of breaking the established order had appeared within the walls of the school. And then they were faced with even harder battles, even more dangerous opponents, and even tougher challenges. And everyone knew. Now John would take the main place in this story. Catherine laughed, and the crowd cheered John, who was now their classmate. At last, real school life was beginning for him. The path led through an old bathhouse, a training arena, and a bustling student street. Ahead was the old school building with a library, where classes on the combat use of superpowers were being held today. The teacher explained that each superhuman has a unique talent with a different foundation. There are 5 ranks: White Haze, Blue Spirit, Purple Soul, Red Mage, and Black God. For the White Smoke, the main thing was physical superiority, strength, speed, reaction. If a Superman trained, he could surpass the limits of human capabilities. The class held their breath as they listened to how someone had already overcome these limits in the past, becoming faster, stronger, more accurate. That's why this rank was called physical. Even at the lowest rank, there were unique abilities. In the selection, the main things were strength, speed, reaction, and combat. Some didn't pass even with good scores. The teacher explained the reasons and started talking about the rank of the Blue Spirit. This rank gave not only a physical advantage, but also special abilities unique to each. Someone in the room eagerly offered to demonstrate his talent. The young man created a flash of light, blinding everyone around him. The audience froze under the explosion of bright light. The teacher explained, explosive abilities cause sudden damage or unexpected effects, but require a lot of stamina and mental strength. Blue spirits are stronger than white smoke, as they have explosive abilities, but still train physical skills. However, that's not all. There is an even higher level, the Purple Soul. Purple Soul is a rare rank in the school, combining incredible abilities and unique secret techniques. The teacher explained that the secret techniques of the Violet Soul often require risking one's life and can enhance other abilities in conjunction. He turned on a recording of a combat exam where a student was practicing a secret technique. Although the participants' faces were blurred and the sound was muffled, the tension in the classroom was growing with every passing second. The student's talent was combat wind, and on the recording he easily created a wind whip and a wind kite. These abilities were enhanced by the environment until the wind reached the required strength. Then the guy activated the secret technique, Dragon's Breath, Tornado. And even through the screen you could feel the force of the wind, capable of destroying everything around. The students silently watched the recording, feeling fear of this destructive force, like a natural disaster at the hands of one person. But the real shock came when another fighter destroyed the tornado with one blow. Its movement was so rapid that it seemed as if the wind itself obeyed it. The class shuddered at what they saw, and John realized the path of the Superman is both greatness and mortal danger. John felt the air around him tighten. Every gaze in the room seemed to pierce him through and through. Emily recognized him as the same fighter from the foggy duel, the one who had fought his way through with only his fists. Now he sat among the others, even though he had had no connection to their school until yesterday. The girl's eyes showed distrust and curiosity. The special set explained his appearance, but it didn't remove the question of who he really was. Suddenly, the entire city was shaken by the news. A meteor burning in the sky was flying towards the Shiao range. An entire settlement could be in its path, and a threat that was hard to imagine followed the meteor. More than 1,000 alien creatures would burst through the atmosphere along with the fragments of stone. They reeked of the cold of space and death that ordinary walls would not stop. While the vanguard prepared to meet the enemy, the rearguard had to act as a shield. John knew that even the slightest order could throw him into the thick of the battle. He felt the tension tighten in his chest. His shoulders went numb with the thought that at any moment, everything could turn into chaos. Disputes raged in the dormitory. Some despised the rear guards, others envied their privileges. But most of all, they talked about the frontline soldiers, heroes who meet monsters face to face, see meteorite craters, and smell blood and hot stone. Someone fondly recalled their brother, a frontline soldier, living in luxury, risking his life every day. Others silently looked at the old buildings, shelters for those who had returned from the front. And then there were them, the three school goddesses, spoken of with reverence by even the most cynical. The Ice Princess, the Battle Saint, and the Lightning Princess. It is said that those who saw them in battle had no doubt why they were named that way. In every movement, there was a real power that broke fear and gave birth to hope. The words sounded like the echo of a storm that had not yet broken. John listened and understood. The calm was only the surface of the water, under which a storm was already bubbling. A test lay ahead, and each of them, even the rear guard, could be a part of it. The air smelled of metal and the coming battle. The training ground breathed of powder and sweat. The dust trembled underfoot, and the silent promise of a fight hung in the air. The students practiced their punches, remembering that fists and feet don't have eyes. Mistakes can be costly. John faced his opponent like a hunter facing a hungry wolf. No spiritual techniques, just steely muscles, speed, and precise calculation. The opponent broke easily. For John, it was a warm-up. He longed for a real battle between life and defeat. Meanwhile, in another area, the footsteps of one of the goddesses cut through the silence like a blade. The look was calm, but lightning was crackling inside. She was known as the Battle Saint, mysterious under a mask. Her appearance was both frightening and awe-inspiring. The line of fighters crumbled like foam under a wave. Some retreated, others looked away, feeling their own worthlessness. She beat calmly, as if she were breathing. Her victories seemed as natural as blinking. Titles, rumors, legends, she didn't care. She only wanted to find someone who would break the peace of her heart. Someone mentioned the guy from the first zone. Strong, fast, maybe able to hold out for a few minutes. At first, she was indifferent. But curiosity woke up like a spark in dry grass. She made a bet. 3 minutes of fighting. John did not back down. There was not a shadow of fear in his eyes, and when they met, the air was filled with tension. Their blows sounded like the cry of steel on stone. He caught her movements, and she caught his intention. The speed was blinding to the spectators. They saw only shadows and heard the sound that echoed throughout the hall. Time slowed down just for the two of them. Every touch was a threat, every movement like flying over an abyss. 3 minutes passed, but the flame inside her hadn't died. For the first time in a long time, she wanted more. She changed her rhythm. She rushed forward, closing the distance, challenging his reflexes. Her movements became faster, more dangerous. The second degree of acceleration, and the world slowed down for her. The spectators could see nothing but flashes and splashes of sweat in the air. Their struggle resembled a dance of spirits. And then the order came. Urgent mission. Her face was calm again for a moment, but her eyes were still burning. Lily's name echoed through the crowd like a thunderclap. To some, she was a goddess. To others, a nightmare in the flesh. She gave the boy a quick look, as if promising to continue. She would be back. And he stood, feeling his heart beating in his chest. Hot, alive, thirsting for revenge. The name remained in his mind. Lily. And he realized that he wanted to be with her again, not for 3 minutes, but until his last breath. The red-eyes scourge suddenly disappeared, and the city of Shiao was plunged into a silence that caused fear and surprise. 13 students from the southern school survived and rose to fame. Their names became legends, their faces matured by the touch of death. Yesterday's classmates looked at them with envy, wanting to be near them, but were afraid to meet the gaze of those who had seen real horror. Soon, the order came to head to Shao Ridge, a dark place of ash, ruins, and monster eggs that threatened a new catastrophe. The school was buzzing with hope of gaining fame or not becoming a burden. The teacher read out the names of the council. Among them was the fragile Emily with a sharp, razor-sharp gaze. Some sighed with relief, some lowered their eyes. There was tension in the air because everyone knew that now every mistake could cost their lives. John received a brief message and went to meet the unknown, feeling anxiety mixed with an unusual warmth that he denied. The cafe welcomed them with the warmth of the lamps and the smell of coffee, which could not drown out the bitterness of war. Catherine was already waiting, pale, but her eyes were shining with determination. She didn't ask permission. She simply announced that she was going with them to the ridge. And something in his chest broke and grew back together, as if there was a sense in taking a risk. His classmates sat nearby, watching them, swallowing smiles and anger. But he saw only her, a thirsty look, an uncertain smile, and trembling fingers. Then came a simple phrase about cinema, like a tiny pause between two battles. He agreed, despite the pressure of fear, the broken knees, and the shadow of death hovering over his shoulders. And in that moment, the world seemed warmer than it had ever been since the massacre began. Somewhere outside the window, a burned city swayed, full of wounds and ghosts. And between them, something living was being born, shaky, but stronger than fear. The hope that even amidst the ruins and blood, something more than battle can be found. And that behind every heartbeat lies a reason to fight again. The slopes of Shao Ridge were shrouded in mist, creeping between the tents like a ghostly curtain. The students had barely left after their battle with the creatures when a boy with a stern look approached them. John could feel the tension in the air. Some students were shaking with adrenaline. Others were accepting fruit from locals, taking little. John knew he was being sought. His footsteps led him through rows of tents, where other students ran past, eager for new adventures. The senior mentors stood in front, their faces showing fatigue and experience. Their presence added a heaviness to the air, as if an invisible hand were pressing down on their shoulders. The boy learned that he was not just a student, but a member of a secret organization. The rank he had just been told about imposed responsibilities and power that he had not asked for. A moment of excitement flared in his chest, quickly replaced by determination. He had to protect others, even if he didn't think he was strong enough himself. The mentor coldly warned John about the true purpose of the journey, but some secrets were still hidden. When the boy returned, the group was in a state of uproar. Some complained about the forest, others were afraid of the dark thickets. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke. The instructor was talking about mutants, flesh-eating beasts. Xiao's spine seemed alive and ready to attack at any moment. The next morning, their warm-up turned into a real test. The forest around them hid something more in the shadows, and each step became more difficult. The instructor spoke, lowering her voice, as if she herself was afraid to remember. The Emperor of Beasts was so gigantic that he darkened the horizon like a moving mountain. The city has disappeared from the face of the earth, and among the ruins now reign monsters that have built nests there. The humans were evacuated, but the royal creature proved invincible. Even the strongest superhumans suffered heavy losses, including their legendary dean. In the morning, the group went out for a warm-up. Whoever couldn't keep up the pace would be left on their feet. The jokes died down. It was a test of endurance. The students gasped and stumbled, trying to keep up. Fear and fatigue mingled in their gazes, and the ground beneath their feet became increasingly heavy. But even when their legs grew numb with fatigue and their breath caught in their throats, the crowd picked themselves up again and ran on. A battle awaited them that they had not yet imagined, and John himself felt that the real danger was only approaching, lurking in the shadow of the huge beast emperor, whose breath could destroy cities. While breakfast was cooking, a cold fog swirled over the camp. The students shifted, smelling the porridge, but their minds were already among the shadows and bushes. Everyone knew, not just beginners, but the best of the best were gathered here. And yet fear scratched someone from the inside, like a sharp claw. Conversations about cities and homes came in fragments, lost in the rustle of the wind. A quiet hope was visible in their eyes that there was someone of their own among the strangers. Finally, the smell of food dissolved their anxiety. The students gulped down their food in a hurry, as if each bite could provide strength for something more terrifying than just training. After breakfast, the mentors ordered them to explore the path, check the hollows, and destroy the mutant eggs. The warnings sounded cold, as if death were a common occurrence. Some clenched their fists, some looked away. Everyone understood. The assessment was more important than peace. They split into groups, and the forest inhaled them, disappearing into the dense undergrowth. One boy, alert and silent, noticed dark bushes stretching toward the river like tentacles. Others were surprised by his attentiveness. Some joked nervously, others shrugged it off. But the tension was already hiding between the words. Hands scratched at the thorns, sweat stuck to the hair on the forehead. One suggested chopping everything up with the spirit technique, but the others stopped. Too loud, too dangerous. Slowly, with scratched hands, they made their way alone. Each step echoed in their heads like the beat of a drum. Doubts swirled in their minds. Why exactly were they sent to do such meticulous work? The eggs are almost invisible, hidden so that even equipment would be of little help. Anxiety was growing. While they were thinking, a rustling emerged from the silence, and the mutant rushed at them. The attack was sharp, like a bolt of lightning, but just as suddenly the monster turned and disappeared, leaving behind the smell of slime and fear. Some were excited. Catching him would mean getting the highest score. Others felt a chill in their chests. This mutant was no ordinary one. The students found a clutch of eggs with a faint glow inside. This aroused both curiosity and alarm. The creature that laid them could be nearby. John spoke sharply. "We must call for help, or this will end in blood." One of the students rushed back to the instructor, swallowing air like water, and when he returned, the thickets were already teeming with panic. Another attack. And among the screams, an inhuman voice was heard, complaining and calling for help. That voice made my blood boil. It was a trap. A large nest appeared among the bushes, a ball of eggs, slime, and darkness that breathed an ominous warmth. It wasn't just one creature here, it was a whole flock. The wind carried the smell of rot. Confusion shone in their eyes, but there was no turning back ahead. Only thick fog, ragged breaths, and the feeling that the real battle is just beginning. Xiao's spine tingled with tension as the forest sensed the approaching disaster. A damp mist enveloped the land, hiding everything behind a ghostly veil. Deep in the thickets, a cave with a dark heartbeat, containing a nest of mutants. The advance party had not noticed it, so now it was a trap for those approaching. The students in the red zone felt fear grip their chests. The fog didn't just close their eyes, it locked their thoughts in a hopeless circle. The students were urgently evacuated. The fog hid a level 6 creature, too dangerous for beginners. An alarm signal abruptly urged everyone to exit. A convincing call for help rang out among the trees, but in reality it was a trap. As cold and insidious as a predatory gaze, John knew he had to act quickly. His friends might already be at the nest, surrounded by these creatures, waiting for the right moment to strike. The fog grew thicker, heavier, as if filled with evil intent. With it came an invisible threat, deadly, from nowhere, but close. The instructors hurried to evacuate the students, realizing that time was running out. The fog was not just a natural whim, but a deadly trap. John noticed small mutants hissing out of the ground, and behind them in the darkness lurked a large, cunning creature. A real threat. She did not attack first. She calmly watched as her small servants wore down the enemy, leaving them with strength and hope. He realized that this fog was generated by eggs in which alien creatures were maturing. Their appearance would poison everything around, destroying life in Zishan Park. His heart clenched with fear, but determination flared in his chest. He would not let this white darkness become a death sentence for everyone. John used all the tricks he knew. An icy blue flame burned in his gaze, and the poisonous energy of revenge raged around him like living fire. He methodically exterminated the monster's relatives, one by one, moving swiftly and ruthlessly like a shadow with a blade in its heart. John understood. The eggs were not for offspring, but to release a poisonous mist, a threat of ecological disaster. Meanwhile, other students were getting off course. It seemed like the safety fence was just around the corner. Just a little longer and they would be safe. But as soon as they took a step, the world would turn upside down. The fog played with them, leading them astray. locking them into a circle from which there was no escape. Stories of people who had disappeared in the white fog burned in their heads. Horror grew in their thoughts, making their hearts beat so fast that it seemed they were about to burst. And somewhere in the midst of all this horror, there was hope. Someone had to find a way out. Someone had to stop the monster before it was too late. A moment ago, the students had stood together. Now the guards could see only heavy waves of fog sliding through the trees, hiding their friends in their white claws. They called out to them again and again, their voices breaking, but no one answered. The distance was so small, and the fog ate away even their cries. Fear gripped their chests with cold. Someone suggested tying a rope around their waists, saying that this way they could turn back if the road melted in the fog. The idea seemed crazy, but there was no other way. The guard took a step forward, feeling the fog thicken and breathe on his back. Step by step, the rope tightened. His friends shouted after him, but he could hear nothing else except the sound of his own breathing. A shadow flashed nearby. He trembled, but he kept walking until the silence became threatening. Someone tugged on the rope. Something had happened behind him. Suddenly, students emerged from the fog, pale and frightened. Despair was in their eyes, their lips were trembling. It turned out that they heard a woman scream and tried to rush to help. But it was a trap, a monster capable of imitating a human voice. The vines dragged their legs back as if alive, and the thick fog erased landmarks. John remembered the main mutant with red eyes who could seduce with his voice. Fear mixed with anger. Why hadn't they warned them about this? Why wasn't there a word in the books, and communication with the outside world was cut off? Now even special devices did not work. Only a few managed to break through the dead zone and talk to those still left in the fog. Everyone was waiting for some kind of hope, and hope appeared. It turned out that the fog originated from mutant eggs. When they came into contact with moisture, they released a gas that rose and thickened in the sky. But there was still a chance. Once, researchers managed to catch a giant centipede with a human face, the only creature that could devour these eggs and not die. She's somewhere here, in the fog, among the mountains. And if we find her, there will be a chance to escape. Some were afraid to even think that the only salvation depended on the monster. But there was no time for doubt. We had to act quickly, divide into groups, collect as many eggs as possible, use them as bait, and pray that the centipede would actually come. And above all this, fear hung. Something else was wandering in the fog, something strong and cruel, knowing no pity. Emily remembered how the train stopped at the edge of the fog, and a monster burst out of the mist and destroyed all life. Every step could be their last, but they had to go, or they would all die. Pale faces, determined looks, clenched fists, inhaled the poisonous mist and rushed into the unknown. Because even in a death trap you can still fight. And perhaps, win. The fog enveloped everything, cold and heavy. The teacher felt anxiety in his heart and stopped his gaze on the unknown slope. The group moved forward, their footsteps echoing dully in the damp air. Each stared into the gray waves of fog that seemed to stir and whisper something incomprehensible. John moved with lightning speed, his body cutting through the mist, ready to meet the monster. The mist hid danger, but also helped him merge with the elements. Luna was calling the battle group, checking to see if everyone was there. Her voice was tense but confident. She had to know that no one was lost in the deadly fog. The instructors' voices came to life on the airwaves, sharp and focused. Each one of them rang with tension, like a tightly stretched string about to snap. Suddenly, John's name was mentioned. He wasn't at training. This aroused suspicion. The memory of the Dragon Fang filled his mind with a chill. The secret organization that had frightened and fascinated him was now close at hand in a valley that breathed evil. The instrument rumbled, showing fog engulfing rocks and trees, blurring the boundaries between the known and the unknown. The tension was growing. The air smelled of metal before a thunderstorm. The screen was silent. This silence was more nerve-wracking than the signal. And suddenly, like a clap of thunder, signals flashed in 3 places at once. Monsters appeared as if from the void, where a moment ago there was nothing. The thought of them teleporting seared his mind. How could such a monster appear out of thin air? What dark force was creating them? At the top of the mountain, the girl felt a shadow approaching from behind. The heavy breathing of the unknown monster cut through the noise of the wind. Her heart jumped to her throat. In an instant, the cold fear turned to rage and despair. His hand jerked for his weapon, but the giant mutant was already towering behind him like death itself. The echo of the order to flee was broken by the roar of darkness that surrounded them on all sides. The attempt to escape became futile. Reality was washed away like sand under a wave. Below, near the headwaters of the river and at the bottom of the valley, bizarre silhouettes rose from the mist. Everyone felt a chill in their chests. The monsters had come not just to fight, but to destroy all life. The mist crept across the valley like a living, poisonous creature waiting to attack. John stood among the broken rocks and shells, cold sweat running down his back. Another moment, and hundreds of mutants appeared behind him, nightmares that had broken through reality. His heart pounded. A fire of power flared in his hand. His fist smashed the first attackers, but the next wave grew like an angry tide. He realized he had touched a nest, a living factory of death under a stone, giving birth to new scorpion flies. The air trembled with a buzzing sound, and each blow that wiped out the enemies only raised a new onslaught. The sensor flashed red dots, bloody sparks of menace. The fear that had been waiting for so long burned his chest. If he stopped, the pack would flood the valley in an hour, destroying everything: people, plants, the land. The communication was hoarse. Commander Luna instructed them to hold the valley's defenses while the others evacuated the students and looked for a way to stop the invasion. Fear and rage fought in John's soul. Why him? Who, if not him? The Dragon Fang fighter. It's time to prove it with actions, not words. A cold wind ripped the torn cloak from his shoulders. The air smelled of rot, blood, and the ancient power that had awakened in this crack between worlds. John gratefully remembered the instructors and the team who didn't abandon him. Even if it's a hopeless mission, they fight together. The rocks trembled, revealing a black fissure from which winged monsters continuously burst out. A portal to a sinister other dimension. John felt something heavy press against his mind. What was there behind that curtain? What power had managed to create such an inexhaustible army? The air thickened around his fist, fire burned in his veins. Each blow echoed like thunder in his heart, and more mutants flew into dust and blood. They grew more and more numerous, and even the stone beneath his feet trembled with their weight. Each new wave appeared almost instantly. The portal breathed them in like lungs. He gritted his teeth, remembering his commander's words to survive. That request burned brighter in his heart than any order. The wind blew ash from the wreckage, and for a moment John felt less human than a blade tempered in fire. If he stood, so did the valley. And even if an even darker abyss lurks beyond the portal, let her know. There is someone here who will not back down. Someone who will meet her with a fist that glows with anger and hope. John decided to step into the portal to see for himself what lay within. He was filled with anxiety, but curiosity and duty proved stronger. John stepped forward and found himself in another dimension, among the ruins of ancient structures in a strange light. Against the yellow-black backdrop, John saw giant monster eggs pulsing with green light, as if waiting for their time. The dragon inexorably advanced towards him, spewing streams of hellish fire from its mouth, burning everything in its path, leaving a charred void behind. Behind him, terrifying scorpion flies swarmed, their stingers gleaming with a poisonous sheen, their wings buzzing like a predatory chorus. Against the backdrop of this chaos stood the figure of the goddess, anxiously begging John to leave, for his own good, for then inevitable death awaited him. Scorpion flies rushed to attack the boy, piercing the fog with their poisonous stings and ear-splitting buzzing. The goddess burst into a blinding light and charged forward, cutting through the mist and incinerating swarms of scorpion flies with a single swing. Her eyes burned with determination to end the darkness forever. Fear beat wildly in her chest like a terrible drum. The student stood amidst the clouds of cold, deadly fog that was pulling her into the arms of the demon's tentacles. The demon possessed the girl's body, taking it over for her dark intentions. The students met their instructor, Mary. They told in horror how they had barely escaped a pack of monsters in the fog, but the silence that fell between them cut sharper than any sword. Why was she silent? Why were her eyes cold and her movements alien? Fear swept over her in a wave as someone realized it wasn't her. Something had stolen her body or deceived her gaze. She was being controlled, or maybe she had long since died. The demon in the instructor's body suddenly pounced on the student, wrapping her tentacles tightly around him like a trap, giving him no chance of escape. She mercilessly devoured the students one by one, sucking them into the darkness of her tentacles like a shadow devouring the light. Some students managed to escape the deadly circle, escaping wounded but alive. The demon did not let go of its victims. She greedily devoured the students one by one. The instructors tried unsuccessfully to contact Mary. Her vital signs had disappeared, and the signal was silent, as if she had simply been erased from reality. The instructor exploded in despair, calling out to John and begging him to answer, whether he was alive. But the connection was falling apart. The channels were blocked. There was only interference on the air. It was as if the fog itself was drinking the words, preventing them from reaching us. The horror was approaching. Every step was a death trap. Mary, possessed by a demon, killed the students. The question tore at his chest. Could John also die, crushed by this darkness? Could he escape the shadows? Luna tried hard to reach John. She knew that Instructor Mary was just a shell behind something terrible. John came to his senses in time. The darkness was oppressive, but fear did not break his will. Eyes were bleeding. Body was burning with pain. The fog thickened, slithering across the floor like a living spider following every movement. His mind was breaking free from the grip of panic, searching for logic in the chaos. He understood that this was no coincidence. This was a trap woven of evil and deceit. When his gaze fell on the instructor, a chill ran down his spine. The dry shoes, the strange behavior. Something was wrong, too perfect for a wounded man, too unnatural. From somewhere in her soul, anxiety grew. She was no longer human. The demon that had consumed her body had taken on a face that resembled trust, but hid death. He could feel the cold malice radiating from the creature. A dangerous game was unfolding in the air. Every blow could be the last. The demon moved with lightning speed, attacking without mercy. His blows were sharp as blades, and each maneuver was like a deadly dance in the abyss. John knew how to dodge, trying to find a weak spot. His thoughts raced, counting blows, calculating the crumbs of a chance for a powerful spiritual fist. But his strength was not enough. His mystical fist was still too weak to defeat this shadow. The demon smiled, cruel and mocking. His voice pierced the heart with a coldness like ice, shattering the last shreds of hope. In the rhythm of the battle, he felt his luck holding him on the brink of death. But that alone was not enough. More was needed, a powerful impulse that would pierce the veil of darkness. A fire that would burn away evil and bring back the light. The fog thickened, shrouding them in darkness, but he did not retreat. For even in the deepest abyss, a ray of hope can be found. The last chance grew in his chest, pulsing with energy. He gathered his strength, ready to strike with all his might, to destroy the demonic shadow and prevent it from consuming the world. The demon mocked the boy maliciously, hissing that Mary herself had long since become disappointed in his strength and hopes. But the provocations had no effect on John. In response, his heart only burned with more rage towards this creature. To the demoness, people's blows seemed laughably predictable, as if she read them in advance, toying with her opponents like a cat with wounded prey. The demoness licked her lips with a smile, calling John appetizing with seductive veins. John realized that brute force was useless. The demon had read him in advance. Cunning was needed, yet John did not retreat. He gathered superhuman strength, clenching his fists so that energy boiled in his veins. Obsidian is a stone of dark power. In the fog, John found a cave and a landmark, a dead tree. My heart was pounding. A withered crown appeared in the fog. The tension was growing. The fight was approaching. The dark figure lurking in ambush was not about to let go. Its eyes burned with wild fury and contempt for any attempt at resistance. John's blow shattered the darkness. Determination triumphed over death, which was already behind him. The blow sliced through the darkness like a blade, and the beast roared in surprise, clawing at the mist. Even the most fearsome lunar mutant had no time to unleash its full destructive power before it was broken by the force. But his undying spirit lingered in a drop, a mystical center that could turn the course of fate itself. The demoness lay motionless, but an ominous green glow still shone from her chest. It was the glowing drop of life, an ancient stone that contained the remnants of strength and hope for rebirth. A cold ally walked alongside them. They were united by a goal, to find strength against an even darker threat. Images of the past battle flashed through John's mind. The moon demoness has grown even stronger. The mutants are growing into a threat that could destroy the world. The appearance of the drop of life became clear. With such power, there was no room for delay. The ally stretched out his hand to cleanse it of the spirit of the deceased. The hellish visions in his memory did not break John. He believed life was worth the fight. Mary's voice echoed nearby. She was dead, But leaving her body to the monsters was not fair. It was a matter of honor. Thoughts swirled around their allies' last words. They swore to help each other defeat the most powerful enemy of the alien world. John saw Luna's faith, and their hatred of the ugly world united them more strongly than magic. Ahead lay a valley shrouded in thick mist, full of secrets and dangers. Yet, a clear path and hope gripped their hearts, leading them forward with determination to fight the darkness. A group of young men walked forward in the dark mist with bags of mutant eggs, afraid of the invisible shadows behind the bamboo. They took risks for the sake of profit, but the way back became a trap. Thick fog and strange breath frightened with every rustle. Hunters from the association appeared, giving hope, but fear remained. Even the strong could fall before the shadow. Catherine walked ahead with cold determination, ready to kill the threat. The boys felt admiration and bitter weakness. She resolutely led the students to the tent, trying to give them protection and peace, at least for a short while. The red-eyed spiders attacked with lightning speed, frightening everyone, but Catherine easily cut them apart, overcoming the obstacle without effort. Her strength seemed unattainable, almost inhuman. For the first time, the boys felt the strength of a warrior looking death in the face, and they themselves felt as fragile as ants in the forest. On the way, their eyes fell on piles of mutilated demon bodies. The smell of blood and metal stung their nostrils, and the cold pierced their bones. Before them stood the wounded instructor, another hunter whose tired eyes still burned with courage. A predator lurked ahead, a patient shadow waiting for the moment to destroy them with a single blow. The monster waited like an anteater on ants. It did not attack immediately, wanting a larger victim. Its intelligent cruelty was more terrifying than any power. In this trap, a spark of hope was born. Even the monster is afraid of the camp. In this fear, the boys saw their chance to survive and become real hunters. The professor and his assistant rushed to rescue their comrades, who were stuck in the sticky demonic web like flies in a net. Catherine was left alone on the battlefield, facing a fierce enemy. The cold wind hit her face, but her resolve grew. Catherine knew she had to be careful, even though she was strong. At Nando's, she was considered the pride of the institute, second only to her in strength. Fear did not break her. Her friends believed that Catherine would gain time. She moved forward, studying the monster's intentions, but doubted her own abilities. Catherine rushed at the monster with lightning fury, delivering precise and merciless blows. The professor and his assistant had high hopes for the girl, believing that her determination and strength could turn the tide of the battle. A blue energy burst from Catherine, flashing like lightning, striking the monster with incredible speed. In battle, Catherine skillfully combined a variety of weapons and magical techniques, keeping the enemy in suspense with every blow and spell. The creature's mouth was open in an expression of despair. It knew it would soon turn to ash, scattering through the air. The professor rushed to help, releasing a blazing stream of yellow energy from his hands, a tangle of pure power and ancient magic that pierced the air with a menacing brilliance. Behind them, they hurried to free their comrades. Hope smoldered in the acid rain. The Skull Widow was wounded, and faith in salvation lived on. But he didn't have enough strength to fight this demon face to face. The professor remained to cover for the others, accepting this duty as his own cross. Protecting her friends was also a matter of honor for Catherine. Demonic spiders emerged from the shadows, hurling their bodies, blood and screams seeping into consciousness. The demon healed the wounds with their power. The realization of this hit her like a blow to the chest. Had all of Catherine's efforts been in vain? It was proving terribly difficult to penetrate this creature's defenses, but they were all superhuman. Each had their own strength, their own abilities. Together, they could break this trap. They couldn't let Catherine fight alone. She had already done so much, sacrificed so much for them. Their hearts were filled with gratitude and pain. The aura of the Skull Widow sprouted fear in the mind, fettered the will, and made even the brave tremble. Only the sun flame would save against it. They were looking for a way out. Professor Zhang was thinking about how to break the trap and not leave anyone behind, because the Skull Widow was constantly reviving. Catherine had made a choice. She had to hold off the enemy so the rest could escape. Her decision burned like fire in her eyes. They were afraid, but Catherine did not back down. She believed that her friends would eventually rise up, break their fear, and leave no one alone. In the darkness of the cave, Black Widow devoured half of the spiders, feeling the power heal her wounds and fill her with deadly power. Her eyes blazed with hunger. Teachers relentlessly broke through the web, freeing students from the grip of the demonic trap. Fear paralyzed the academy students, but a spark of stubbornness flared in their hearts. They were not going to die without a fight. Catherine fought feverishly with the monster, each of her blows piercing the air with lightning-fast energy, forcing the monster to retreat under the onslaught of her unquenchable fervor. The Black Widow tirelessly absorbed every blow, but this only fueled the fire in Catherine. She knew no fatigue and did not stop delivering new, even more devastating blows. The spider devoured everything around her, a true monster of high rank whose strength was unmatched. To the spider, Catherine was nothing more than tempting prey, a valuable delicacy she awaited with hunger and greed. The girl was caught in a spider's web, a cold, impenetrable trap that constricted her every movement. The Spider-Woman considered humans to be pests that destroyed nature. She sought to destroy them in order to protect her wild home. Finally, with a sword and a burst of power, the professor tore apart the thick web that blocked the path, paving the way forward. Demonic spiders created a trap. The students fought their fear and moved together, hoping for a miracle. Catherine stopped, engulfed by the Black Widow's illusions that affected consciousness, sowing doubt and mixing fear with reality. The dampness of the cave squeezed her lungs, the cold pierced her skin. Catherine saw her companions recede and the shadows thicken, creating a fear of loneliness. The illusions of the web distorted memories. Former praises became bitter emptiness, and warm glances became cold and alien. The world faded away, leaving behind loneliness. The Black Widow whispered of doom, of the futility of faith and friendship. Her words tore at consciousness, cutting the mind sharper than blades. Eternity and darkness seemed inevitable. A spark ignited deep inside Catherine, the memory of choosing to stay and give others a chance. Her heart beat with determination, pushing aside doubts. The other students broke out of the cave, looking around in despair. They believed that Catherine's sacrifice would save many, struggling with guilt and gratitude. John stepped out of the shadows. He sensed danger, but the pain of loss was stronger than fear. His steps were filled with determination, not to abandon his comrade. The tension hung like a thunderbolt. The walls of the cave waited to see if they would have enough strength to stand between fear, betrayal, and self-sacrifice. Compared to the pain of loss, fear seemed like a small thing. John felt his heart clench, but moving forward was the only thing he could do. Anger burned inside him, burning away doubts. Communication came to life in short bursts. Commander Luo Lin, Teacher Xang, and Assistant Liu were gathering torn orders. The fog was drowning out the words, but help was on the way. The name from Dragonfang surprised the students. No one thought there was a member among them, but they looked at John with suspicion, an ordinary freshman who had become dangerous. Teacher Xang ordered them to retreat. The students were sad and ashamed. Catherine was left alone with the monster, and their steps dragged guilt. In the cave, the Black Widow froze for a moment, then charged again. Her poisoned will slid into Catherine's mind, attempting to erase her memory and will. John rushed to the rescue. Like a hurricane, he tore the monsters to pieces with incredible speed, leaving behind a trail of blood and clouds of fog. It was the Black Widow's turn. John clenched his fist, and energy flared around him, pulsing like living fire. Blow after blow, the boy tore through the Black Widow as if tearing through the darkness itself. His movements were frantic, his strength as if drawn from the depths of rage. The monster, sensing John's unstoppable power, tried to retreat, hiding in the mist and shadows to save its own skin. But John didn't let that happen. With each step, he closed the distance, his fists tearing through the monster's defenses and preventing it from hiding in the fog. His blows sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil, causing the spider to writhe in pain. Catherine watched the fight, captivated by the fury and strength of John, who had become a ruthless element in the fight. The spider struck Catherine with a stream of dark energy, knocking her off her feet. John caught her in a flash, preventing her from falling onto the rocks. The guy not only picked her up, but also quickly carried her aside towards the tent so that she would be in greater safety. The fight ended quickly and brutally. Black Widow let out a final hiss, her body falling limply. John's main blow put an end to it. Instructor Juchi praised them, but John calmly replied that it was Catherine's credit that she held back the monster, and he dealt the final blow. The instructor watched John, remembering Commander Luna's recommendation. Doubts receded. He was not as simple as he seemed. Before him stood the commander of Dragontooth, a shadowy defender who sacrificed his glory. John nodded, understanding the value of secrets. Ahead is a giant centipede lord, a mutant with 2 mutations. The enemy will not forgive weakness, so you must save your strength for battle. The instructor explained that using force against Black Widow would bring new risks. John accepted this. A battle lay ahead that could destroy everything. The haze of doubt had cleared, leaving behind a cold determination. In everyone's heart, one feeling pulsed. The real battle was yet to come, and the fate of all depended on them. The fog gripped the city with cold, like a living trap. John felt fear at his back, but he had to hide among the students. He was watching for an enemy who could be anyone. Deep down, a doubt burned. Among them was a supporter of the Will of Heaven, an organization that brought chaos through the mutant Dr. David, who turned the city into an arena for monsters. Memories cut through his mind like shards of glass. Screams, monsters, and a fog that blurred the boundaries of life and horror. Many innocents had died. It could happen again. John knew that now they, the new generation of hunters, were the target. Xiao's Ridge could become their graveyard, and the world would be defenseless for 10 years. His heart sank at the thought that even a teacher or a neighbor could be an enemy. Suspicion crept in like a poisonous snake, destroying trust and leaving only determination. John was ordered to remain silent about his true role in the Black Widow's death. All credit was officially to be given to the professor, and he was promised a reward for his silence. They were greeted as heroes at the camp. Catherine came to her senses, the spider was destroyed by the professor, and John's role was hushed up. The students carefully stacked the collected eggs in the tent, preparing for the worst. They waited tensely, knowing that something dangerous would definitely come for these trophies. Ahead, a rumble rose. The ground trembled under the weight of something enormous. A god-level monster was approaching, obscuring everything around it. Even the bravest disciples were stunned with terror when they saw its silhouette in the mist. Suddenly, the instructor appeared, strong and unwavering, with a burning gaze. He tamed the monster and for a moment stopped death. Hope and the cold fear of farewell flared up in the hearts of the students. The instructor said, "He gave his body for the future." His sacrifice was bright but brief, like lightning in the night. The instructor fell, leaving him with one last chance. John clenched his fists and vowed not to let the darkness win. In John's heart lived the thought, the enemy may be near, but the truth will survive. Without fear, he would stand between the monster and the world, unbreakable. The scream split the thick, cold fog like a sharp blade carrying disaster. The students shuddered as they realized it was the instructor shouting. And now, watching his silhouette disappear into the darkness, everyone wondered, was this his final sacrifice? The choice of someone who always went to the end without looking back? On the way to the camp, they had exchanged a few words that left a mark on everyone's heart. John remembered them when he felt a surge of determination. The guilty one would pay. Commander Luna saw that look, full of oath. There was a flame in John's eyes that could burn away the darkness itself. He would not be stopped by fear or doubt, only by purpose. They quickly mounted the tamed mutant, though each step was difficult. The air was thick with ash, but with the danger came the hope of getting out alive. Debris rang underfoot. Some relayed messages to the center, others peered warily into the fog where no one dared to go. And suddenly the guard shouted, "They are alive!" Penn confirmed that 346 students had returned from the death trap. His voice was filled with respect for those who had endured the unthinkable. The joy was quickly overshadowed by loss. The names of the dead rang out like a funeral bell. They left behind a feat that will go down in the history of the Academy. A heavy silence reigned at the ceremony. Meng reminded that the feat would live on in the heart of the school. And although the new names of the heroes were not announced, everyone felt that among them was someone whose courage remained unknown. There were rumors of a member of Dragontooth rescuing others. John was suspected. He had been seen in a spider's nest. But the name was not announced, perhaps out of respect, or perhaps to let the hero remain simply among those he saved. The awards went to Catherine, who held back the monster and led the freshmen out. She became a symbol of resilience for them. Others who supported us during the most difficult moments were also recognized. John was also named among them. His unsung work was also important. The instructors reminded us that this is not an exception, but the usual reality of the defenders. Life there is always under threat, and only thanks to sacrifice can others live in peace. These words fell on the hearts of the students like a heavy stone. But at the same time, they lit a fire. Each of them understood what they were studying for and what they were ready to fight for. Catherine entered the room, holding a lush bouquet of flowers in her hands, when suddenly her phone vibrated. A call from John flashed on the screen. He crossed the threshold of her room, and at that moment something indescribably warm and magical flashed in Catherine's eyes, as if love itself had filled her eyes with a living light. Catherine's eyes shone with gratitude and silent question. John remembered how the widow spider had almost broken his will in a moment of desperation. He remembered the instructor who had stood between them and death. But the truth remained unspoken, clenched in his chest. But even before that, in his darkest moment, he had felt a hand, a force, pulling him out of the abyss. And he still didn't know if it was someone alive or a voice in his own mind. Catherine didn't wait for an explanation. She quietly approached and kissed John gently, erasing his fears and doubts. The kiss was filled with gratitude, relief, and warm feelings without words. She was embarrassed as she tried to express her gratitude. Her thoughts were confused. The words stuck in her throat, and her heart was beating at an alarming rate. The tension on the field. John had been gone for a second week. The anticipation had given way to a disappointment worse than any defeat. His absence threw the goddess off balance. She became angry. She hated those who did not keep their promises the most. The dispute never ended. The winner was not determined. There was a sense of anxiety in the air. Meanwhile, the school was preparing for the freshman awards ceremony. Rumors were circulating among the seniors about a strange child with incredible strength. John was the little one. His absence was explained simply. Training and ceremonies were taking up all his energy. But when the truth came out, laughter swept across the field. Catherine thought for a moment, doubting the appropriateness of her impulse. But her heart told her they were a couple, and this step was a sincere reflection of long-matured feelings. John took the kiss differently, as gratitude, not love. He wondered if there was something more between them, or if it was simply gratitude for being saved. John remembered Lily's promise to train together on Wednesday. The thought made him a little confused, as if it had brought him back to his normal routine after everything he had been through. She lost the bet. Her promise to dance in the middle of the field to the meaningless dance of the seaweed became reality. Anger and shame alternated in a flash, like flashes of lightning. John just stood there guiltily, trying to explain his tardiness. Lily's gaze was filled with disappointment and fatigue. To her, he seemed like an equal opponent, but he turned out to be just a freshman. He is offered a deal, $1,000 to fight Lily once a week. Money clouded his thoughts. He agrees, barely suppressing a shiver of foreboding. But there was an emptiness in his soul. He wanted more than victory or money. He longed for the power that would save him from real monsters. The memories cut his heart. The bone dragon, the terrible monster that covered the sky, was remembered with a chill in his veins. His current strength was barely enough to survive then. He clenched his fists. He wanted to become stronger so that no one else would die in front of him. But even with royal blood, he still had to prove himself. Nearby, a cold, distant, but wise speech was heard. To cross the boundaries, a special key is needed. A shard of life. A purple soul that hides the power to awaken forces and change fate. But that wasn't enough. He was advised to focus on training and improving his existing abilities. The path to sunshine was long and tiring. John learned about a rare stardust, extremely powerful, but available only to those willing to sacrifice everything for power. He had made up his mind. He would get this stardust no matter what, and sell the purple shard if he had to. His heart was beating faster. Ahead lay a path where there was no room for weakness, and he had no intention of stopping. The silence was broken by a phone call. It was Robert, John's old friend. He advised him not to rush into selling and to try to put the rare item up for auction at the Hunter's Hall, where it could fetch a much higher price. Darkness reigned in the Hunter's Hall, but the silence was deceptive. Hidden passions were seething around. A boy with a student badge entered, his gaze promising adventures and challenges ahead. The approach was simple. Sell valuables. Give things to an assistant who knew all the intricacies of the trade and picked the best prices. Around the corner, two older men complained about the lack of big clients. Orders were few, rent was barely covered, and time seemed to have stopped. A young hunter arrived, and although they joked about his assistant, Dora, a gold-ranked assistant, agreed to help. Dora quickly assessed the guy. He wanted a promotion, but he had come to sell a rare violet soul life shard, the value of which filled the atmosphere with tension. The assistant announced the price, $2 million. shocking everyone. The young hunter realized that he was on the verge of great changes with the risk of triumph or downfall. They discussed liquid stardust, a valuable and toxic resource that required caution. Dora explained that even the purest dust was dangerous, and the body had to be prepared for the tests. The assistant warned John, "Stardust is extracted from monsters and can seriously damage the body. The price of power is high. Every choice has a shadow." The assistant explained that stardust should not be abused. The body slowly eliminates it. Its price was $900,000, which seemed unattainable to John. The guy asked about cheaper versions of the dust. The assistant explained that there are less purified and more affordable ones, but they are toxic and can be harmful to health for up to 10 years. With each word, a new facet of the world was revealed, where power and risk go hand in hand, and a true hunter must make decisions quickly because time waits for nothing. They exchanged contacts, made plans. Ahead were auctions, rank increases, and adventures that burned in the heart of the young hero. This was the beginning of a great story. The appraiser put the price of the shard of life at $2 million. The sum was heavy because power has its price. The realization struck John. This shard was his chance to become rich, to get training, equipment, and stardust. For the first time in a long time, luck was on his side. The assistant reminded him that for his merits, John could be promoted to the rank of Sunshine, with access to more powerful techniques and closed training rooms. Nandu's school was waking up, but a storm was already raging in the classroom. John held a crystal. It looked like an ordinary stone, but under the rays of radiation it turned into a mutated crystal with an incredible density, exceeding steel plates. He had a real jackpot in his hands. Wealth and power that had seemed unattainable were now within reach. The class froze. The headmaster ordered with a challenge in his voice, "Break the crystal. Use all the strength you have." The sense of responsibility pressed, but John knew that this was his moment. The crystal lived and grew, absorbing the world like a mine of secrets. John absorbed the materials, but the crystal's reaction surprised him. Professor Feng explained that the mutated crystals were tests created by radiation and time that altered the laws of nature. John felt his power grow and new horizons open up. But a miracle happened. The mineral split in the boy's hands. Surprisingly, the mineral reacted in a special way to John's mystical fist. John showed his hand to the professor, who looked at it in surprise. The guy explained that his power lies in absorbing energy, which then fills his fist. The mineral absorbed energy. John felt real strength, not weight. The professor was surprised. It was an extraordinary power. The laboratory, filled with the highest quality samples, became an arena for experiments. The professor pointed out that true power is not in size, but in density and possession of force. John absorbed knowledge, his hand becoming not just a tool, but a weapon, ready to break down any obstacles. He knew this was just the beginning. Full mastery of the force was a long way off. John was on the brink of a great battle for himself and his world, and he was ready for it. The laboratory was icy quiet, the air tense. John remembered the professor's words. His power didn't just absorb the properties of touch. The young man felt threads of power reaching for the mineral. He believed in touch, but the truth turned out to be deeper and more dangerous. In the lab, the mineral responded to John's presence. He thought the power was only from touch, but his mystical fist felt the essence of the matter around him. He took off his protective gloves, feeling the cold of the crystal, which, as if alive, called to him. His hand trembled, but inside he ignited an irresistible desire to master this power. John approached the crystal with anxious curiosity, his heart beating faster, feeling the invisible call of power emanating from its depths. His hand absorbed the energy of the crystal. A heavy, pulsating power flared up inside, an echo of an ancient element. John realized the weakness of his fist. Without the right material nearby, strength is useless. Enemies could easily cut him off from the source, leaving him defenseless. When he touched the crystal, the reaction was different, more powerful, deeper. He felt that the true power was hidden in direct contact. They emerged onto a ruined training ground, where the stones and dust still held the echoes of previous battles. The air smelled of burnt stone and old iron. The young man gathered all his will and struck. The force exploded like a chain of lightning, causing the air to vibrate. His chest filled with both admiration and fear. For the first time, he felt the true power of his fist. The teacher watched with a cold, watchful eye, as if measuring not only his student's strength but also his will. He knew that the rarer a source of power, the more precious it was. Even tiny crystals of shimmering rank were more expensive than diamonds, and blinding ones were priceless. This power had its price, and it could be too high. The young man dreamed of collecting crystals for a reserve so that he could draw new power from them during the battle. But he understood that he didn't have enough money even for a few pieces. But the professor saw in him more than just youthful enthusiasm. He taught him not only to hit, but also to feel. He called for training all 5 senses, not just seeing materials but feeling their whisper, cold, heat, smell, and movement. He had to learn to choose from thousands of things the one thing he could absorb and turn into a weapon. Without touching, without hesitation, a flash of lightning flashed through his mind. A wild, elusive flash, but one day he might be able to reach it. And then his fist would become not just a tool, but a true Xang, a great masterpiece of strength. He felt the shadow of a great goal fall on his shoulder. And ahead of him lay a road that would change everything. The dampness of the dormitory pressed against his temples. John tried to feel the energy, but it slipped away like a mist. The cold draft carried a crumb of someone else's power. John felt a faint but real rank and wanted to become stronger. A damp breeze blew from the south with a hidden lake, a source of powerful energy that could elevate him to a bright rank. He almost felt the power in his fists, but the attempt failed. Anger flared in his chest at his weakness and determination to try again. The concentration was working, and in time, he would become master of the materials. Footsteps outside the door brought him back to reality. Dora appeared with a mysterious smile and something that sent a chill through the air. She had taken stardust, rare and pure, that could raise his power to the rank of a crowned one. A sense of danger mingled with a foreboding of triumph. John felt a new heat ignite in his veins. Dora reminded him that all this had to remain a secret. He didn't need unnecessary glances or rumors within the walls of the superhuman school. Only silence and the shadow of agreements. He swallowed the dust, feeling the power spread through his body like an explosion of 1,000 sparks. His chest was pounding with a frantic heartbeat. The crown fell down on him with force, changing everything from the inside. A frantic rhythm exploded in John's chest, as if his heart had been beating twice as fast. His veins glowed with heat, and every cell in his body was filled with a pulsating force that was bursting outward. The force surged through his body like a wave, and John felt his fist fill with power. Crowned rank received. The bell rang like a challenge from fate. Today, he had a training session with Mary, and this time, he was allowed to use magic. On the field, the smell of gunpowder mingled with the dust and sweat of old defeats. Mary was already standing there, confident as if the whole world belonged to her. Her gaze was cold and sharp as a blade. The memory burns like rust on a blade. 2 losses and a crushing debt. If she fails again, Mary will have to do a humiliating dance in front of everyone. She believed in her power, honed to the limit. Her magic flowed easily, like a breath of spring wind. She considered herself unattainable, but John had changed too. Behind the mask now lay a different rage and a different flame. His fist thirsted for verification. The air around him was thick with tension, as if before a storm. Their eyes met, and in that moment the world narrowed to the 2 of them. Only one thought echoed in his mind. No mercy. He stepped forward, and the battle began. The duel began, and the silence of the hall shimmered with hot tension. Mary was not going to hold back. Her explosive force tore through the air, leaving a trail of heat in its wake. She knew no mercy, only a furious onslaught and flames burning their way. John felt her flame erode his confidence. Not even a few minutes would be enough to withstand her pressure. His heart was pounding, not wanting to give in to the blows. Mary rushed forward like an angry wasp, her every move blazing with fury. Waves of fire tore through the air in the hall, leaving behind flashes of heat and the smell of burning. Her strength was felt in every move, sharp as a blade and heavy as a sledgehammer. She was truly a formidable opponent, capable of shattering even the most seasoned fighter's confidence. The spectators in the hall held their breath as they watched Mary, a walking element. Fragile on the outside, she could crush a stone. John's strength seemed insignificant compared to her inferno. Inside, another spark burned. Having reached the solar rank, John felt an excess of power overflowing his body. His pulse pounded so loudly that it seemed that the earth could hear the rhythm. John struck first, but Mary's fire was quicker. His hand might have burned, but he didn't back down. She understood. John is not simple, and there is a chance, albeit small. But the fight was slipping away. Holy warriors like Mary hide their strength until the last, and he forgot about it. He focused on his ability to absorb fire, his only chance of survival as the ground melted. But Mary's flames were stronger than normal magic. Her phoenix form burned so brightly that it seemed as if the element itself had become part of her body. Even if John managed to contain the flames, they still seared his skin, leaving scorch marks. Every breath became a fight for his life. There was one rhythm in his head. Don't give up, don't stop. He continued to attack, throwing the last of his strength into the fight. He needed at least a little more time, one more blow. Her words cut like a blade. Is victory worth the wounds in the hospital? Is the risk justified if you remain destroyed? There was only one answer. To retreat meant to betray yourself. Even as his legs shook and his breath hitched, John didn't stop. Almost no one in the superhuman school could withstand such pressure, but he stood. His head was buzzing, his perception sharpened to the limit. He gathered the last of his strength and focused. The only way he could see the weak spot, the only crack in the wall of flame. It was now or never, and he lunged forward, his fists clenched, glowing with the heat of the consumed flame. The tension reached its peak, and the space between them exploded with a movement that could change everything. John felt the cold concrete beneath his feet and the damp breath of the south wind. The air smelled of trees and an old lake full of water power. His thoughts pulsed with one goal. If he retreated now, it would all be in vain. Professor Feng's lessons flashed through his mind. Not to absorb unnecessary elements, to keep his focus only on the water, John cast aside the wind, the earth, and the wood, leaving only the crystal stream of water magic within him. An icy confidence grew within him, like a shield that cut off fear. At the same time, Mary's gaze was filled with fiery determination. Her strength had reached an explosive limit, and she was no longer going to waste time in useless exchanges of blows. A tense calm raged around, before the storm. It called to the end, ordering fate to draw the dots. And John concentrated, feeling the water from the lake respond to his call. His body was filled with a magical wet power, and even the pale glow seemed threatening. Mary's fiery streams erupted with a fury that knew no bounds. In each outburst burned a determination to conquer not just her opponent, but her own doubts and fears. The two elements intertwined like a predatory dance of death. Sparks and bursts of force tore through space, leaving a trail of searing tension behind them. The dance of the water gradually erased the fiery attacks, like waves extinguishing the heat of a smoldering fire. The opponent felt her blows miss the target, and irritation mixed with anxiety. The audience froze. A cold wave of forbidden magic swept through the air, heavy, sticky, dangerous. Hearts beat faster. The power that seemed so terrifying was revealed before them in a flash of blue light. And this was only the first layer of its true power. John rushed forward, and Mary's fire burned brighter. The world was covered in smoke, her lungs filled with dampness, her mind trembled. Mary suddenly choked, and the world was filled with anxiety. Too much water, even for one whose body was accustomed to fire. He rushed forward through the heat and steam, his heart pounding, and his thoughts confused between fear and desperation. John quickly bent over Mary, carefully beginning CPR. His hands were shaking with tension, his mind frantically searching for any hope of saving her life. Suddenly, Mary abruptly broke free from his grip, filled with the fire of defiance. She showed everyone, and above all herself, that she would not allow herself to be broken. He exhaled, feeling both disappointed and relieved. There were no winners or losers between them. Only two who had learned something new. John's words hung in the air. It was an honor to fight such an adversary. Her fire would have seemed invincible to him if he had not revealed his own depth. A victory remains a victory, and a defeat remains a defeat. And one should not cover up the truth with modesty. She gritted her teeth, promising herself not to lose next time. Her gaze burned even more intensely than the flames around her. Other students stood around staring at John in amazement. Mysterious, with a mask, he remained a mystery to them. His strength clearly exceeded the limits of an ordinary first-year student. Yet he did not even reveal his name, retaining the right to a shadow. For some it was a challenge, for others it was a forbidden fruit. But not everyone is able to resist the temptation of fame. John disappeared, leaving only the echo of his presence. And Mary stood there, clenching her wet fists, promising herself it wasn't over yet. Rumors filled the university, but the real battle raged in their hearts. The memory of a fight that changed them forever. The Hunter Center gave John what he had long dreamed of. An icy form. A blinding rank that shimmered with a cold brilliance. He felt a force fill him, like an icy stream cutting through everything in its path. Even if a monster stronger than him appeared, now he would be able to stand. The price was unthinkable. $1,000,000. The amount for which one could buy a luxurious house in Lanyang. Yet this crystal was a real rarity. Dora had to travel all the way to distant Beidou to obtain it, risking time and money for the power they so desired. The realization took his breath away. John was now officially a hunter of crowned rank. With this title, new doors opened before him. Conferences, better missions, and even the right to hire other hunters. He remembered that boy from Hando. Not the best hunter, but a hard worker. That's the kind of guy who needs support. Now John could give them tasks and in return, give them invaluable recommendations. For them, it was a chance to rise higher. There was only one thing that mattered. No one should know his real name. John didn't want the guy to know who he was working for. The guy was given an application. In the award column, there was a recommendation from a professional. And that was enough. Somewhere on the other side of town, a hunter's heart beat faster. He was spotted for the first time. He was entrusted with a task. This was a chance. If he proves himself, he could get more difficult assignments in the future. And the one who gave the task for a moment felt like the true master of fate. John could buy a crystal for $1,000,000, hire others, and even build his own path as a hunter. However, the smile faded when he remembered the money he had spent. $1,000,000 was a pittance, but this crystal was worth it. Thanks to it, hunting would become easier, and the absorption capacity would increase many times over. Another warm memory flashed through his mind. The dearest person was his sister. Her call, so sudden and familiar at the same time. She joked, reproached him for forgetting about her, even though she was always there, even when she had to sacrifice her studies for him. Now everything had changed. John could provide for them both. He told her about the money he had transferred, but the sister refused to take it. She found a job herself, at an astronomy company in Nandu. Although it was only a temporary position, it still seemed like things were finally getting better. John had a hard time containing his pride. His sister was incredible, strong, smart, independent. They met in Nandu and wandered its narrow streets all day under the flickering lanterns and the bustle of merchants. John looked at the majestic buildings and dreamed that one day he would be able to buy a house here. Expensive? Very expensive. But is that scary? He has gained strength and even more so, a purpose. His sister laughed and encouraged him, and he walked beside her, hiding his fatigue. John is ready to work and fight. He is a crowned-ranked hunter with purpose and strength. The boy stood at the door of the Nandu Astronomical Group, a symbol of power and knowledge. His heart pounded. His sister had truly been accepted here. The room was impressive, labyrinths of offices and flickering screens. The fates of cities were decided here. Like the eyes of humanity, they eternally watch the movement of the stars. Thanks to these observations, supermen could foresee disasters and act in advance. John was lucky enough to meet Dr. Wu, the discoverer of the rainbow, an invisible medium that reveals the power of beasts. Impressions were mixed with respect. This gray-haired scientist held in his hands a tool that could save entire cities. Despite the fatigue on his face, a light burned in his eyes. The young man felt like an outsider amidst this calm and concentration. He had only come to see his sister off, but his bright faith in his own dreams did not leave him. Behind the wall, they argued. One did not believe that the Lanyang disaster had passed without mentioning the rainbow. The other insisted on an inspection, although he did not expect it. Dr. Wu, silent and focused, did not look up from the yellowed magazine, seeking peace. The young man hesitantly caught his gaze and smiled timidly, asking permission for a photo. The atmosphere here was a strange mixture of routine and tension. Even the calmest moments were permeated by the shadow of impending catastrophe. My sister was hired on probation. It was her dream job. She could already imagine decorating her room with fresh flowers she had grown herself, and forgetting about the constant hustle and bustle. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden ringing of the bell. Michelle had to go to the flower shop alone. The young man stayed behind. something unexpected awaited him. John received a call from an instructor at Dragontooth team. Excitement ran through his skin. He had been accepted. He became a ghost, a secret agent in the shadows where every step could be deadly. The world turned out to be darker than it seemed through the windows of the astronomical observatory. John was tasked with investigating the person who once sold Dr. Xiao the forbidden equipment, a thread that led to dangerous connections with the Lord of Universal Independence. He imagined a black market hidden behind walls that looked more like a palace. There, among forbidden knowledge and power, he would become a hunter in a murky sea of secrets, a wave of fear mixed with a foreboding of something great. Danger lay ahead, but also a chance to touch the truth that would change the world itself. And while his sister was picking flowers, he was already taking his first steps down the road from which there would be no turning back. He entered, as if touching a secret. The air was filled with antiseptic and something unknown. The guard's gazes squeezed his heart with anxiety. His calm voice spoke of a search for a way to restore the beauty of the girl who had faded. But inside, every word trembled with fear. The salesman narrowed his eyes, searching for a lie. The manager smiled predatorily, promising a miracle cure for old age. Behind his sweet words, a dangerous force hid. The corridors stretched like the entrails of a beast. Footsteps echoed dully. Shadows moved under the lamps and the walls seemed to know forbidden secrets. John was afraid. The name he said could be fatal. He had lied about his aunt, and the silence that followed cut like a blade. The door opened the way to a forbidden laboratory, where cacti soaked in poison produced flowers. The basis for powders of youth, as if ghostly. John felt cold, watching the science and greed. The manager extolled the wonders of the alchemists, as if reciting a forbidden prayer. Then it got worse. In cages, insects drank human fat, taking away years of life and leaving devastation behind, offering a costly path to perfection. John was confused by the story of the eggs with an alien power, the potential to change the world. Fear and curiosity mixed within him, creating a poisonous cocktail. He saw not cosmetics or medicine, but alchemy that played with human nature. Here they created the illusion of victory over death, and every step deeper led to a costly abyss. A nightmare unfolded before my eyes in the face of hope. The silence breathed fear, and in my soul I realized, some secrets are worth the highest price. In a world that was rapidly moving forward, the Xuanzang serum was the key to a new evolution. Wrinkles, disease, old age were to be a thing of the past, and death would become just a flaw in the code. But the hero's thoughts were constricted in a cold foreboding. What was this man up to? The infected creatures, kept secret, possessed superhuman strength and abilities that bordered on nightmare. John remembered the pictures. Dead embryos at -40, motionless, like fragments of another reality. But enough warmth and moisture, and they would come to life, breaking through their shell. Even if destroyed, they can be resurrected, and that was scary. Smugglers saw profit in this. The larvae would enter the body, multiply in the stomach, and gnaw their way out, leaving devastation behind. Even a 1 in 1,000 chance would cause panic. The merchants knew they were selling death in the guise of a miracle. It was madness, where the greed for profit clouded reason. And yet they smiled, offering quality goods. John clenched his fists as he saw the live larva in the murky liquid. The blood receded, his skin turning white with fear. The experiments were conducted with the center's permission, even though the court banned them. The loophole was a defense in the name of Nandu University professors, which gave them immunity. John tried to calmly negotiate payment, but the credit card was declined. Only cash, supposedly for security, which was more beneficial to them. Inside, he was suffocated by suspicion. The elevator was gliding too slowly between the 9th and 10th floors, as if between two worlds where danger could lurk. The thought of floor 9.5 seared into his mind. What was there? What was hidden so deeply that even the silence felt threatening? A woman passed by, her gaze familiar. A chill ran through him. She was the one who had recommended these underground services. And now he had been exposed. A cold determination flashed in the trader's eyes. They could not stand spies, and they never let them go alive. John followed Nurse Sun like a shadow. It was hard to breathe inside. The walls smelled of chemicals and the tension was simmering like before a thunderstorm. Director Jen watched carefully and spoke coldly, stopping them. Song's heart was beating fast. His back was covered in sweat. Had they been discovered? She felt a cold anxiety from Jen's joke. Indignation burned in her soul, but she kept her composure with her will. The secret had to remain between them. The thought of everyone finding out about her boyfriend's younger age hurt her pride. But Sister Song was willing to endure the humiliation to get an answer. After a tense conversation, they managed to leave. With movements that resembled the entrails of a beast, they moved away from the main hall. And in the shadows of the corridor, where the silence seemed even heavier, Sun exhaled with relief. She talked about her suspicions about David, who had changed since the sponsor. Guilt and anger burned her, and the desire for the truth was stronger than fear. John tried to calm her down, but his voice was muffled. She was stubborn. She had to act, even if it meant taking risks. Her thoughts tore at her heart like shards of glass. The mention of Tianquan added to the fear of events. The mysteries were tangled together, becoming darker. Sister Song had more and more questions and less time for answers. She recalled how David avoided studying and advised him to contact a teacher from Nandu. The sponsor remained unknown, but the Lichen Company had a secret location. John had asked her not to go there tomorrow. His words were quiet but firm, like an oath. She could tell he was more afraid for her than for himself. Sister Song agreed, but in her heart she decided otherwise. Nandu University held answers that she had to find, no matter the danger. John hesitantly pressed the call. There was a whisper in his head and anxiety behind the nurse's smile. He wanted to share with Luna, to find someone who would listen. The tension in John's chest eased. Luna coldly explained that Alice, the spy, was a front for the corporation and had been under surveillance for a long time, so there was no reason to worry. In a cramped room, the woman was subjected to brutal testing. Alice screamed, but the scientists mercilessly lowered her feet into a container of larvae. She was frozen with terror. It was not just pain, it was an experiment. To those around her, she was just material for perfection. The rough voices ordered patience and spoke of trust, but there was only ruthlessness in the eyes. The larvae greedily entwined themselves around Alice's legs, and the screams squeezed the walls. Others watched as if they were training an animal. They were only interested in the benefit and the result. Body, soul, life, everything came down to what could be measured. Professor Feng watched from afar with cold curiosity, without emotion, only with understanding. For the sake of the goal, the puppets should not know who was pulling the strings. In the shadows, Sun clenched his fists, not knowing what abyss had opened before him. But despite his fear, his chest burned with determination to go to the end, even if the path was through darkness. John entered the dim laboratory where shadows awaited him. His heart beat in the silence, his footsteps echoing. He came not for the gloves, but for answers that burned his soul. Professor Feng sat at the table, his eyes cold and tired. In front of him were black demon skin gloves, the last hope or curse of the past. Fen was tormented by dreams and voices that forced him to work. He could not forgive the mistake that had destroyed Lanyang. The guilt ate away at him from within. John felt pressured, doubting his credibility. The professor admitted that he was a chess piece in a game where victory was more important than the truth. John listened with hesitation, imagining his interlocutor's past. Years of loneliness, lack of support, and bitter failures before middle age. A man who walked through darkness without money, resources, and laboratories still found a mentor, a generous and devoted one who never left him in trouble. Professor Feng felt a weight of guilt gripping his heart like a shackle. All the mistakes, all the losses that had befallen his hometown of Lanyang, he carried them on his shoulders. The finale was approaching. A hand held out a glove, a symbol of a choice that could change everything. Accepting this gift meant taking a step into the unknown, but there was no turning back. Professor Feng felt a burden of guilt as he recounted how he had taught David to extract the blood of the beasts of calamity, knowledge that had led to disaster. He regretted that he couldn't turn back time to change the course of events. All of Li Kang's organization's research was based on his developments. Now there was no going back. The professor found himself trapped in accusations, manipulations tightening around him. He remembered a mysterious teacher, mysterious, wiser than anyone he knew, even though he had never seen him in person. He asked for trust, assured that he was not behind all the crimes that were unfolding. Knowing the truth meant uncovering a conspiracy where his role was not what it seemed. The door exploded, and men in black burst in with bullets. Voices shouted about arrest and forbidden research. The past cruelly caught up with Fen. The professor did not resist, surrendering to power and his soul. He held out his gloves to John, his last chance. In his eyes, sadness and hope. In the silence, the darkness thickens. John knew pain and truth lay ahead. He clutched his gloves, the power or curse that would change everything. The boy didn't have time to realize how the ancient goddess had awakened within him. Her cold fire pulsed under his skin, intertwining with his power and blurring the boundaries between them. They argued, whose interest was Professor Feng protecting? His strange behavior made this already confusing story even more suspicious. The goddess and John doubted his kindness, but saw genuine suffering over a fatal mistake he had once made. Professor Feng was not good, and his remorse did not wash away the blood. He taught how to purify the blood of mutants and brought death to Lanyang. The real villain is the mysterious teacher, who pulls strings from the shadows. This master stopped at nothing. Taking advantage of the weaknesses of others, he left them in ruins, while he himself remained unreachable, watching with a cold smile as the world burned. Even the strongest were afraid to speak his name aloud. The teacher seemed to John to be a force much greater than they had all imagined, and the thought of it seared his mind like a red-hot iron. The goddess remembered a student who might know the master's name. Getting him would remove suspicion from Fen. The real culprit was still in the dark. John dared to take the risk of persuading the goddess to become an ally. He saw in her not only strength but also the key to a shared truth. Sometimes John dreamed of cold vanilla ice cream to forget the burden of the past. The goddess silently approved of this weakness. Even the strong need rest. John imagined chicken, baozi, dumplings, crayfish, and tea. But the cold in his chest brought him back to the fight. Life went on as usual. Classes, training, books. It was as if John remained the same. But in the darkness, his gaze sometimes glowed with something predatory and ancient. Neville was the center of attention. The huntsman had given him a symbol of power that opened the doors of power and danger. The mysterious dragon fang hovered over them like a predator waiting to strike. The selection of the best students promised both glory and danger. John stood like a rock, his words a challenge and a shadow of strength. A group of friends lured him to go and have fun at a luxurious club where 3 goddesses from the university gathered at once. The dancing, the flickering of light, the noise of voices, everything merged into a single feverish moment. When John's friends saw her, Elizabeth, the ice princess who seemed unattainable, something tightened in his chest. Her movements were graceful, like an icy whirlwind, and her gaze was cold and watchful. And John was suddenly afraid that she would sense that a stranger's soul was now hiding in his shadow. The light flickered, the music beat in his temples, and the ancient goddess within him laughed softly, ominously. And then he realized the real danger was not outside. It was within himself. The club's light was changing its face. Lily sat calmly, though restlessness pulsed inside. Her birthday brought together even those she hadn't expected. The new guy stood, holding on tightly to his brother in arms, John. John's eyes scanned the room, every little detail potentially important. The dim light hid the truth behind the masks, and suddenly she was here too. Elizabeth, with a gaze as sharp as a blade. Her appearance stirred up waves of memories and fears. The thought crossed Lily's mind that even at parties, everyone plays their part. She was annoyed by the hustle and bustle and the drunken students who were indifferent to the real thing. Maybe the problem was that they weren't interested in her. The conversation turned to the painful one, the one who had defeated Lily. Excited voices, even the goddess had been defeated? Who was this mysterious victor? She felt anger rising, mixed with shame. She had lost only because of her own carelessness, because she had underestimated him. And yet she did not want to name that fighter. John answered, before he could turn off the sound. His voice betrayed the location, the DJ, the music, the roar of the crowd. Lily's heart sank. It meant he was here too, somewhere nearby. Her thoughts raced at breakneck speed. If they found out that it was he who had defeated her, they would quickly guess who he was. And with that, his past would be revealed, his connection to the Dragon Fang. John froze when he heard the call. On the screen was the name of Dora, the hunter's assistant. The voice was terse, without politeness, as if there was anxiety behind the scenes. Neville's task had paid off. Among those who emerged from the mist, there were people who could shed light on the darkness. 9 of the student council knew more than they were allowed to say. This club had all the right people. This was where the threads could come together. He felt the answer was somewhere nearby, among those faces in the flickering light. Robert suggested a game to guess the mystery winner, and it sparked real curiosity among the students. Lily seemed cold, but inside her throat tightened. She knew that to start the game would mean no turning back, but her heart yearned for the truth. John stepped into the shadows, knowing that to reveal himself meant losing his secrets. But was his fate leading him to this? He seemed like a victim, old and scared. But behind the words about the lichen was something more that no one dared to say. They cleared the 9th floor of the medical and cosmetology building. What they saw confirmed their worst suspicions. The acolyte exists. He's somewhere nearby, in the institute itself, and his shadow is wider than any guess. Young and cold, he erased the traces of crimes, disguising them as accidents. He saw more in the fog than others and weaved the white fog into an innocent activity. His plan was based on chance, but chance worked for him. He connected the 2 worlds in such a way that no one noticed the trap. Only faint traces led to Tiankayun and destroyed the illusion. They had only caught the bait, the false master, the shadow of the true puppeteer. And somewhere among the ruins the acolyte might lurk, waiting for the right moment to destroy the world. The memory of the day the monsters appeared sent a chill through his skin. The beasts of catastrophe had emerged from the darkness, and even the thought of the mentor was frightening. In the Rain Lake bar, voices rang out, blurring the line between fear and despair. Students sat over tea, their thoughts focused on the empty streets and black fog. They advised us to flee before dawn, because the hunt had begun. John sat amidst the laughter and noise, pretending to be part of the crowd. The best place to hide was where everyone could see. He listened to the students laughing as they played their dangerous games. Somewhere in the general buzz of the bar, the name quietly flashed, Dragonfang. The mentor caught it like the scent of blood in the rain, and something clicked inside, setting the gears of the plan in motion. Operation Blossom, which had been frozen at the very threshold, suddenly got a chance to come to life. There was no need to say anything out loud. A look, a slight tension of the shoulders, and everyone around already understood that the night was starting its own game. Mia was to become a judge, and the tension was building like a storm cloud. She had been nicknamed the walking lie detector, not by hearsay, but by the experience of those who had tried in vain to fool her. Mia's gaze cut through the thin threads of self-deception, broke through the masks that people were accustomed to wearing, and saw what they themselves did not want to admit. John was advised not to stand out. There was one in the crowd who could catch the essence of the thoughts. So he had to be an inconspicuous student and wait for the moment to disappear into the shadows. The game began. One question, did he beat Lily, seemed simple, but it hit a blade that cut through the lies. The answer no came out indifferently, but the silence seemed heavier than the screams. Suspicion grew among the listeners. What if he was the elusive shadow? The game was becoming more interesting. Eyes were pressing on him from all sides. The feeling of hunting was intensifying. And at that moment he realized, now they were expecting his true face. The hot, shimmering room breathed music. The rules were simple. One question, an honest answer, and yes, on the dance floor. No lying. The truth lurks in the darkness. The first question flew like a spark. Is there anyone here who is in love? The heart trembled, the ears buzzed. Those who were touched came forward, and the dance floor came to life. Mia's gaze swept across the room, cold and watchful, like the rays of a scanner. She peered not at the words, but at the thoughts themselves, reading the faintest movements, the fluttering of eyelashes, the involuntary gestures. The students froze, as if her gaze could reveal any secret. Tension hung like smoke, and their chests tightened with fear of the truth. The air became even thicker when the second question was asked. Who is in love with Lily? Whispers, surprised looks, and a few brave men stepped forward, defying fear. Every step onto the dance floor was like baring their souls in front of everyone. The next question hung in the air. sharp and dangerous like the tip of a dagger. Which of them is in love with Elizabeth? Silence gripped the air. Eyes darted to the girl, and the hearts of those who had kept the secret beat faster. Mia, like a predator, caught every breath and tremor, searching for the truth amidst fear and excitement. The game was gaining momentum. Questions were pouring in one after another like arrows, each one sharper than the last. Some were trying to make a joke, some were trying to expose someone else, and some were cunningly hiding the truth behind silence. But according to the rules of the game, silence was punished with a bottle of wine that had to be drunk to the bottom. John stood aside, like a stone in a storm. The question was brewing, but the fear of breaking the game held him back. He watched the laughter, the arguments, the embarrassment, and waited for the truth to break from someone else's lips. But time passed, and a new question arose. Who defeated Lily in a sparring match? Silence fell over the hall like a blanket of ice. Everyone was sure that there was no such thing, because Lily seemed invincible. Their gazes turned to John. The fire in his eyes had died down after a sip of bitter wine, like defeat. But even worse was the feeling that the real game was just beginning. In the crowd, behind a mask of indifference, lurked the one they were looking for, the bearer of a secret that could destroy the peace. Everyone felt that the most interesting thing was yet to come. In the hall, where shadows glided like mist, every breath resounded as if fear had come alive in the empty temple. The goddesses whispered John had been there when Lily called, and disappeared into the shadows. A sudden realization flashed through the air like a spark in a dry field. He had been there all along. John, a name that instantly wiped smiles from faces. Delight and fear merged into an explosive mixture. After all, it was he who defeated the invincible Lily. Someone clenches their fists, someone looks away. In memory, the exam, where he showed unexpected strength. At that time, not everyone understood. This was the birth of a monster. They lived next to him, joked, shared food, and yet didn't know who he really was. It's amazing how close an abyss can be that no one notices. The thought makes you cold inside. The air seems to tremble. Everyone can hear John inhale, preparing to ask a question. His gaze is cold, like a scythe, and his voice is calm. But behind the words lies a blade. After asking Lily about the winner, it became clear there were too many suspects. The crowd was silent, the threads of suspicion tangled in a shaky web. Chaos was gathering in the air, the thunder before the storm. These gamers were just confused in their guesses about Lily's winner. The question was too general, like a projectile without a target. To get to the truth, more precise, sharper questions are needed, like a sword that cuts through the darkness. The echo of John's confession shattered the silence like thunder on a hot day. His words, simple and at the same time heavy, flashed in the eyes of those present. He had defeated Lily in a sparring match. John threw a cold challenge to the hall, and his words sounded like a bolt of lightning in the still night. The question of hatred and death hung in the air, causing trembling and anxiety in the hearts of those present. The silence is deafening. Fear flares up in their heads. What if the truth is revealed? What if there really is someone among them who harbors hatred? Lily looks intently at the faces around her, searching for familiar features among the 9 students. But in vain. They are not here. Emptiness instead of an answer. Cold, deaf, like a whirlpool. The game ended like a gust of wind tearing through the silence. Some said a hasty goodbye, others silently accepted defeat. But for John, it was only the beginning. The enemy disappeared into the darkness again. My heart burns with anger. How could he have been wrong? The bastard who killed his comrades looked into my eyes and disappeared. His friends tried to cheer him up, but their words were broken by the wall of silence. This was his war, a lonely and cruel one. Deep down, he knew he would never be able to forgive this defeat. And the faces from that exam flashed in his memory, those who had also passed through the fire. They were sitting right next to him today, hiding their secrets like blades behind their backs. And he didn't notice. The world becomes different, darker, more treacherous. Now he knows that the enemy is closer than he seems, and this game is just beginning. Lewis is a blade from the depths of memory. His figure emerges from the twilight, like a shadow lurking behind the shoulders. The realization is painful. The enemy has been there from the beginning. He was the last to infiltrate the student council, a small detail that created a terrible picture. The exam time was determined from above, and he knew it in advance. John searched like a beast. His heart pounded, his anxiety boiled. He looked out at the parking lot. Lewis could be waiting there, in the shadows between the cars. They met, like arrows flying at each other. Lewis's gaze was a cold blade. In the silence, my throat tightened. In another moment, the truth would explode. Lewis lunged toward the car, the engine roaring, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The car came barreling toward John like a shot into the night. His heart was burning. His legs were throwing John sideways. The asphalt was cold. Sweat was on his temples. The roar of the engine and the smell of metal were cutting into his consciousness. The beginning of the battle. John struggled through the pain, the wind whipping in his face, his footsteps beating like storm drums. Faith was screaming. One more step, and Lewis would be close. John didn't wait. In a rage, he grabbed the keys and climbed onto Robert's motorcycle. The metal came to life. The night shuddered with the roar of the engine. A chill of suspicion chilled his soul. The white fog that had suddenly appeared 2 days before the entrance was no accident. He had deliberately wanted to exploit the fear and inexperience of the newcomers to sow chaos. The plan was superior. Bribery, big money, and Lewis was in on the conspiracy from the start. And when the narrator almost took his place, anger burned in his chest. Memories were torn. Voices were distant. Anger gripped his temples. John had to find Lewis and destroy him. The sports car shone like a stranger's smile. John knew the truth was out. There would be no escape. Hundreds of ways, but only one chance to stop him. Desperation drove him forward. The motorcycle roared, cutting through the evening air. The fire of revenge burned in his eyes. Memories of broken lives burned like wounds. John saw the victims and vowed not to let the bastard escape. The distance was closing in. My heart was beating like a drum before battle. It was as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The asphalt roared. The chase became a duel. Fear against rage, metal against metal. The night whispered, "You will not escape." But the enemy is more cunning than he seems. Betrayal, lies, bribery, all are just means to make himself unreachable. And even now his cold confidence cast a shadow of fear. The abyss nearby called for a fall. However, the cry in his heart did not subside. Retribution for everything he had done. He had to answer for every death, for every tear. But Lewis laughed. Confidently and contemptuously, as if death was not for him. And the hero who was chasing felt his anger become a burning wind, carrying him forward. Strength is almost at its limit. Every blow is painful, but it is too late to stop. This is more than personal revenge. It is an attempt to stop the evil that has grown from poisoned roots. Suddenly, a bell rang through the night. Lewis announced that John was missing. He had fallen off the cliff, and the silence was cold. The ground was giving way, but John didn't give in. His heart screamed. He wouldn't let it disappear. He remembered everyone he had betrayed. But within minutes, the shadow returned. John appeared like a ghost. Wounded but burning with determination, he had only one goal: to destroy evil. Lewis froze in surprise. John seemed to have come back to life after the fall, ruthless and invulnerable. Before he could recover, a powerful stream of magic exploded from his hands, aimed directly at John. The air is tense, sparks fly before a deadly battle. Two shadows have come together, and only the night knows who will survive. Blow after blow tore through the night. Lewis's magic blazed like lightning. John staggered, bleeding, but he didn't look away. He stood to destroy evil, even though he knew he lacked the strength. Lewis laughed coldly, his words cutting like a blade. He said John was empty inside. He had nothing to absorb. John's gaze was filled with icy contempt, like a blade cutting through the silence of the night. Lewis did not stop. Streams of strength burst from him. The air hummed with tension. The earth trembled. He went to the end, not knowing fear. A drop of water fell on John's fist, cold and alive. He suddenly realized that hope still lingered. Even in that, one could draw strength. In an instant, John released the ice dragon. A cold force burst through the darkness. A wave of ice covered the battlefield, freezing the air. Lewis's fire was scattered before the winter elements. Water crystals flew like sharp arrows, tearing through the air. Memories of past victims flashed through his mind like haunting ghosts. John rushed into battle without hesitation, enraged by his opponent's words. The idea that Lewis considered himself superhuman only fueled the fire in his chest. Their figures intertwined in shadow behind him, pushing him forward. Like a burden of guilt that forced him to move even when his body screamed to stop. Lewis was frozen in the ice like a stone idol. His pride was shattered by the cold that enveloped every muscle. Defeat became inevitable. Victory was John's. The command center gathered in the memorial hall with anxiety and hope in their eyes. They saw that even the young could burn out under the weight of loss. The air there was saturated with unspeakable pain and fear of new losses. He was faced with the one he had once considered his teacher. The blow of this betrayal proved sharper than any sword. My soul ached so much that it became difficult to even breathe. But against all odds, John proved his worth. He fulfilled his promise. He caught the enemy. My hands were still shaking from the battle, but my heart could not find peace. His silence spoke louder than any words. He risked not only his own life, but the hopes of others. They pointed out the danger to him, reminded him that he might not return. But he needed no excuses. His decision had been made before the battle. Not even the shadow of fear could extinguish the flame of duty. The road ahead seemed as bleak as a moonless night. But John saw that even a tiny spark could cut through the darkness. But thanks to his step, something new was born, hope. And although pain and loss were still ahead, it was impossible to stop. Because someone had to go ahead. Someone had to be the fire that would destroy the darkness. And John accepted it, even at the cost of his own peace. Day was breaking outside, but the sky still held traces of the night's silence. John was walking through the cold morning mist when Emily emerged from the darkness. Her gaze a mixture of curiosity and slight anxiety about the unknown. They were heading towards the same place, but each carried their own shadows. The memory of Professor Fenn, the moment he was led away in handcuffs, haunted John, a memory as sharp in his mind as a shard of glass that had left a wound in his heart. The choice of teacher seemed like a coincidence to Emily. For John, it was inevitable. Feng was gone. Only the mysterious Tang Han remained. There was silence in the memorial hall, so dense that it seemed like you could touch it. The rows of students froze, waiting for the first word as if facing a verdict. The air smelled of old paper and the cold stone of the walls. Tang Han walked out slowly. His gaze seemed indifferent and at the same time piercing. His voice was calm, but every word contained a tension that tightened his chest. He did not speak. He seemed to be weighing truths in his palms, showing them to those present. The students grasped the meaning slowly, like an epiphany in the darkness. It wasn't just about history or theory. They were faced with a question that destroyed pride. Why did humans gain power while other creatures remained in the shadows? John's thoughts raced. What if they really weren't special, just a coincidence in the chain of evolution? As he listened, he felt a cold fear growing inside him. Fear of being destroyed by someone who will take over. Tan Khan envisioned a future in which humans were mere prey for new predators of the mind. He didn't embellish. His words were hard, like stones falling from a cliff. And in this cruel truth, there was a disturbing honesty. The students absorbed his every breath, and the silence between words seemed louder than the shout. Some tried to doubt, some tried to look for logic, but Tang Han remained adamant. His faith was based not on fear, but on calculations and experience. He spoke of other species that had already gathered tribes, having gone through in decades what humanity had overcome in centuries, and it sounded like a warning of impending disaster, which we could still try to avert. But time was running out. An abyss appeared in John's eyes. What would happen to those he loved? But there was hope in Tang Han's words. Knowledge could become a weapon. There was still a chance to remain more than just witnesses to one's own end. He said that they would have to go into territory where fear and the unknown reigned. That they would have to look into the eyes of those who might one day view them as prey. It was more than a lecture. It was a warning. John felt his heart beat faster, determination building in his head. He wanted to know the truth to the end, even if it was scary. Because living in an illusion seemed even worse. The goddess stood nearby. Her presence felt like a breath of wind. She looked at John with irony and a hint of contempt. Her thoughts were so cold that even the sun couldn't warm them. She didn't believe that humans could stop the threat. They were too weak, too slow. But even she had to admit, there was something unknown in people. And this spark made them dangerous even to the gods. John dreamed of another world, where they, so different, could stand side by side. But that dream seemed as meaningless to her as the hope of spring in the midst of a bitter winter. There would always be a chasm between them, created by fear and pride. But even so, John was not about to give up his own. Because sometimes a crumb of faith is stronger than a whole world doomed to disappear. And darkness? It only makes the light more visible. John didn't understand why destruction seemed the only option. Fear and doubt were mixed in his mind. A virus is a line of code. An antivirus destroys without pity. But people were too alive to be reduced to this logic. He was reminded of evolution. The papers proved that humans descended from apes. But why them, and not others? Dolphins are no less intelligent. But they didn't become the ones who changed the world. Maybe it was beneficial for someone to give people this power? This thought seemed crazy. But within it pulsed a truth that raises new questions. Maybe humans aren't just a species. They're the Earth's living immune system, just like the dinosaurs before them. John clutched his bag. His sister carefully checked her things, hiding the worry in her eyes. Her trips always left the room quiet and with a faint smell of shampoo. She reminded me, if you feel danger, run away. This order left a warm scar in my heart. Her colleagues burst in through the door, cheerful and with playful looks. The atmosphere suddenly changed. They joked, glanced at John. To them, he was just a brother. To the white-haired girl, he was someone more. His cold politeness concealed anxiety. Inside, everything was buzzing, as if before a storm. The sister left with them. Only the warmth of their hands remained in the air, like a memory. Familiar figures appeared on the street. The guys from the university moved quickly, like shadows. They talked about the front line. The ruins beckoned them like the abyss of night. The freshmen could only be in the rear, but they wanted more, to step beyond the forbidden line. John was drawn to them, to prove to himself that he was capable. But the chill of fear crept over his skin. Concern flashed in the boy's eyes. The words were not spoken, but his heart heard them. I wanted to hug him, even for a moment. But instead, there was a promise. He would come if Catherine was in trouble. The bus started moving. A quick glance, a slight smile, and the world behind the glass became distant, like another dimension. John remained on the sidewalk, his heart pounding as if something forgotten was left behind the glass. And then she appeared in the crowd. Elizabeth. Her presence cut through the silence like lightning. The student council president, whose eyes attracted more than words. In that brief glance, something more than coincidence flashed by. The students laughed. Fate itself was leading them into danger. And with Elizabeth, this trip no longer seemed like a boring adventure. She was tasked with overseeing the newcomers. The meaning was vague, but in the avant-garde, every little thing matters. Some just shrugged their shoulders, the student council president among them. This is no longer just intelligence, but a real operation. The students knew well. Only the chosen ones break into the student council. And the president was a legend in his own right, a force that made even the bravest tremble. The strongest high school students rode with them, each with a dark trail of stories and a sharp aura of power. The newcomers didn't expect to be covered by so many formidable elders. So the research is really important. The path led to Fuzhong, to the old Guanyun reservoir, a place where the earth remembered blood and secrets. Fishermen were sitting on the shore. Someone was making fun of a friend who was entertaining his wife at night. He himself was just holding the fishing rod until morning. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he didn't look up from the water, as if he were waiting there for an answer. The wind was blowing dandelions near the car window. The mother angrily hissed at the child. "Don't lean out, it was dangerous." And the fisherman was happy with the first bite. The heavy silhouette was tearing the line, and his heart was pounding in his throat. He was calling for help. The ice was cracking, fear was mixing with adrenaline. Suddenly the fish fell silent. The life disappeared from its eyes, which had just sparkled, and a cold feeling crept down its spine. She was dead. It was very strange. And then one fisherman turned into a dead man. It inspired horror and incomprehension. The silence was broken by the voice of teacher Tanya. He was talking about the samples they needed to find. Plants that are aggressive towards living things. Not for the sake of sun or water, but real predators. They don't hunt flies and butterflies. They want the blood of large creatures and even humans. Old trees devour young ones, blocking out the light. And these plants have decided to move on. In the darkness of the tank, something waited. Something that had learned to hunt and dreamed of fresh meat. Suddenly, something leapt out of the shadows, metal howling under the impact of the brakes. The tension shattered the silence like fragile glass. Hearts sank. Was it really a monster? But it was only a wild deer, frightened and wild, darting through the thicket. The deer disappeared into the darkness of the forest, leaving behind only a breath of fear. Its footsteps fell silent, like the echo of another's fate. The bus moved again, its wheels touching the road uncertainly. Ahead lay ruins and the smell of old magic. The city of Fuzhong greeted them with gloomy streets and flashing police lights. A rumor of death hung in the air. The student's steps became heavier under the weight of expectations, and the cold of the stone squeezed his chest with anxiety. The tasks were assigned quickly, as if casting lots in the dark. The 5 groups set off in different directions to search for samples. Some dreamed of staying with the president, to feel the warmth of power next to him. But the choice was made not with the heart, but with cold calculation. When the names were called, something heated up inside. The chosen ones felt a bitter mixture of pride and fear. They have been given the darkest task, to investigate a strange murder. Who is to blame, a beast or a man? The elders looked at them seriously and threw the task onto the shoulders of the newcomers. Some people's chests were filled with protest, while others clenched their fists. They walked through narrow streets where even the wind seemed wary. The city breathed with secrets. The corpse waited amidst the crowd and the cold stone. The smell of blood mixed with the tension that hung in every gaze. The police didn't want to let them get close. They lacked experience, they said. But the students' eyes showed a challenge and curiosity that were stronger than fear. They did not back down. Someone from the locals mentioned, "We need a hunter of the moonlight rank. Otherwise, there will be no trust." The silence was broken when John produced the royal emblem. Everyone froze, staring in awe. The royal rank washed away doubts like rain washes away dust from the road. The path to truth was open to them. They approached the body, feeling the breath of death and something ominous in the air. A determination smoldered within. An investigation lay ahead, full of darkness, danger, and the chance to prove one's own strength. The students' bodies had already been opened. Inside, everything looked as if the person had been dried to the last drop while still alive. The muscles were shriveled and darkened, as if they had been lying in the scorching sun for months. There was no blood or moisture left, only a dry shell where the heart had once beat. The eyewitnesses had not yet recovered from their fear. In the morning, the man was full of strength, joking, sitting with a fishing rod by the water, and within minutes, he was found as dried up as an old scroll. The cameras showed nothing, neither the beast nor the shadow of the monster. Some suggested that the mutant from Black Mountain was to blame. It was known to have wings that could eclipse the sun, and one bite was enough to leave no trace of its victim. The police were torn between fear and logic. Some believed it was a poison that acted gradually, and the sun only finished the man off. But John saw something else. He suspected that the blow had been inflicted not by beastly fangs, but by something small, inconspicuous, like a poisonous, insect-like scourge. The students set out for the scene of death. The Guanyun reservoir greeted them with quiet water, shrouded in mist, in which something ominous could be heard. They fished here at night, lit fires, and roasted their catch. But there was no trace of fire near the spot where the body was found. A dead fish caught my eye. It was preserved as if it had died only yesterday, but it was dry and crunchy to the touch. The policeman remembered that the witness had spoken of a strange fish that had frightened him to death. He had not thought much of it at the time, but now fear had seared his thoughts. They picked up the camera footage. The screen shows the fisherman throwing the fish away, and it falls right back where they found it. John bent over the grass, peering into each stalk. Perhaps there were clues here that someone had missed. Especially since the professor had mentioned the mysterious plants of misfortune, and that could be the key. John touched the fish with his fingers. The same dryness, the same eerie emptiness as the victim. A suspicion flashed in his eyes. Perhaps the real enemy was not from the sky but from the depths. A silent premonition sounded in the silence. Water keeps its secrets better than any shadows. Their journey had just begun, and the cold in their hearts hinted that something worse than a beast lay ahead. They acted without hesitation. As soon as they suspected that something dangerous was lurking in the water, they immediately called in a professional diver. The diver began to descend to the depths, exploring every bit of the underwater world. John's anxiety grew like a black wave. He had to get the samples first, or no one would believe him. The divers agreed quickly, too quickly, their faces calm, but their eyes were filled with anxiety. The rest of the group clenched their fists. It was hard for them to understand. Why would the cops listen to a stranger? They were muttering about the old teacher's name, behind which he was supposedly hiding, wanting to play by his own rules. There was a sense of tension, like before a storm. The students were about to head into the mountains or the forest to look for traces of the beast. Elizabeth tried to stop them. It was dangerous to be separated, otherwise she would not be able to protect them. But anger was stronger than fear. They left, leaving a worried look behind them. The police wanted to check the mountains anyway. Maybe there really was a monster lurking there that fed on cattle. The divers kept gliding through the dark water, their flashlights cutting shadows from the mud and silt. They were looking for even the slightest clue that would shed light on the mystery. When the first news came, a chill ran through my skin. Bones were found in the water, whole piles of gnawed bones. The finds were varied: cows, pigs, sheep, even deer. There were no human bodies among them. But instead of relief, a cold unease came. The villagers had complained before that their livestock was disappearing. Now everything had come together into one terrible puzzle. The divers returned with dark faces. They brought samples of underwater plants and fragments of bones. There was a fragile certainty in their voices. There, under the water, something hungry was breathing. And it wasn't a fish. The day was fading. The sky was growing heavy. Continuing the search at night would have been suicidal. John decided to take the samples to the professor. The others agreed, although fear trembled in their eyes. What if the truth would destroy the city? People are already on the verge of panic. And these bones? Until there is evidence, it is better to remain silent. Additional samples from the shore smelled of silt and something else, distant and old. Then the widow of the deceased appeared. Her voice was quiet, but there was strength in it. She invited them into her home. The place smelled of warm broth and fresh rice. They entered silently, keeping the shadow of their thoughts to themselves. John knew that the one who devours livestock will not stop. This is not just a beast, this is hunger that walks in the dark. People needed to be evacuated. But the war blocked the roads. Even the mountains became a trap. Help would not come. They were left alone. John decided tomorrow morning he would go under the water himself. He would look fear in the face. It's dangerous. But if there really is a monster hiding there, he has to find it and stop it. Dinner was smoking, filling the room with the smell of home. But behind the soft light of the lamp lurked a shadow of anxiety. And to the taste of this dinner seemed bitter, like fear. The broken streets of the dead city lay black among the dust and stones, like an open wound in the body of the world. Only 10 kilometers from the border, and every day it became more and more dangerous. Once a place of fighting for survival, the ruins are now teeming with beasts of doom. If their nest is not destroyed, this place will become a vast hive, spewing death upon entire cities. Intelligence reported that the monsters were afraid of water. The river was the only way to get inside. The commander clenched his fists, feeling the cold moisture under his skin. Determination burned in his chest. Someone had to go first. In the back, Catherine swallowed her anxiety, hiding her eyes. Her brother and his team were the strongest. Even the weakest of them had the rank of heavenly flame. She knew that the human forces were preparing a counterattack. But these monsters did not know what retreat or help was. They only knew hunger and death. One thought flashed through the girl's mind. If her brother was killed, the world would never know peace. But if he survived, it would be a big step towards victory. The commander took one last look before disappearing into the darkness. He promised to return on her 20th birthday, and she believed him. Others watched them from afar. Staring at the silhouettes of the warhawks, they saw in every movement a force that broke rocks. Even the weakest of them had the rank of heavenly flame. And her brother was even higher. He was the rank of white swan. Rumors circulated about the galactic level, unattainable for ordinary people. And everyone knew, if they fell, they would still be heroes. Somewhere in the darkness, the old professor couldn't sleep. His fingers fumbled among the specimens. Wild herbs, broken bones, old legends. His mind was racing with one thought. These monsters were growing faster than you could imagine. Once they had eaten only small prey, now they were attacking dogs and livestock. Every fragment of bone spoke of a hunger that was becoming greater than fear. The professor saw this not just as horror, but as a way to know the enemy. John described a clash with the demonic matriarch of the Azure Moon. The second time she disguised herself as an instructor and became even stronger. But in the end, he killed her for good, even though she was invaluable for research. The student nearby trembled, imagining what would happen when the beast ran out of prey. Then the city would become a table for the predator. The old man carefully examined the samples. Rotten duck wings, fresh cattle bones. Everything pointed to one thing: The monster was evolving. At first he ate small things. Then he became strong enough to hunt a dog. Now he had enough strength to kill a bull. And then people will be under their teeth. The truth was horrifying. But the fear was fueled by the determination to collect more samples. They had to understand who they were dealing with. Somewhere in the darkness of the river, a predator stirred. And the city of Fuzhong froze, waiting to see whose bones would be next. John resolutely set off for the reservoir, not even waiting for support. He was haunted by a premonition that something important had slipped out of control. There was only dirt, stones, and dry branches around them, seemingly mocking their hopes of finding a trail. But fatigue gripped their chests, and even their heads were buzzing from the sleepless night. The comrades argued among themselves, bursting into insults and reproaches. But the anger and despair in their words only emphasized the main thing: fear. The fear that the beast somewhere nearby is much more dangerous than it seemed. The president had to stay, even though she wanted to run after them. Dark shadows grew beneath her sunken eyes, and her body trembled with fatigue, but she confided in her friends. Anxieties remained in her soul, cold and sticky, like dew on stones. Meanwhile, John was already standing on the shore preparing to dive in. His heart was beating rapidly, as if warning him of something terrible beneath the surface of the water. Below, in the mud, the fragments of bones were white. There were an awful lot of them, and each one told its own silent story. The boy gathered everything he could, feeling his fear turn into concentration every minute. Scary fish fluttered in the background, as if they were signaling with their gaze that danger lay ahead. Then the boy noticed a strange lump that looked like the tentacles of an unknown creature. It seemed to be prowling in the darkness, devouring fish. Something alive, hungry, and alien waited underwater. Another dive. A little deeper, and a strangely round bone appeared under his hand. The touch of it seared his consciousness. It was a human skull. A wave of cold ran down his spine. The beast was no longer content with small prey. It began to hunt humans. And this skull was proof that the recent fisherman was not the first to die. The professor's warning flashed through his mind. The monster's appetite was growing, and it would surely rush towards the city. A crowd of defenseless inhabitants appeared before his eyes. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a threatening movement in the water. John felt something approaching swiftly behind him, like the shadow of clouds on a stormy day. The beast was not dead. Its body still trembled in the water, full of predatory power. A clear order was born in John's head, not to panic. His hands obeyed, his legs still moved. That was enough to survive. The tension in the air was palpable, like the smell of ozone before a thunderstorm. The stones underfoot, the cold water on my skin, everything merged into one pulsating rhythm of struggle. And when it seemed that there was no chance, willpower prevailed. A sharp jerk, and he slipped from the predator's clutches like a shadow through fingers. The blow of the great sand click shattered the silence. The element struck with a force that shook even the earth. John held on, but could the beast hold on? All that remained around was the whisper of water and heavy breathing, in which something more than fear could be heard. It was a readiness for the next battle, and the main thing awaited them ahead. Something cracked in the air, as if the darkness itself had moved. Anxiety gnawed at his heart as his companions called out for John, trying to break through the roar of fear. He answered briefly, holding fear in his palms like a cold stone. The shore seemed far away, but his friends were waiting there, ready to cover their backs. John, shaking with rage and adrenaline, snatched the worm, a sense of victory over an invisible threat burning in his chest. The words were spinning in his head. The one who seemed fearless could become deadly. The beast in the water was not alone. Behind it stood the whole shadow of hungry nature. The collected samples were already on their way to the professor. Their bones, like the tattered pages of a cursed book, could tell about the danger that lurked beneath the water. Deep down, John felt that the find was only the beginning. He still had to bring the professor this predatory worm whose hunger devoured all living things. Gnawed human bones lying in the mud flashed before his eyes. He thought of Wang Jun, whose life had probably been cut short by these monsters. The friends promised not to let anyone near the tank. Their voices were firm, but in the silence of the night, even the bravest could feel the cold breath of fear. Returning to the professor, John showed him the ominous find. He watched in amazement as the worm dried up without water and came to life again with the slightest touch of moisture. The professor was captivated by this mystery. He saw in this creature the key to the solution that had hitherto been hidden in the darkness. The bones were still needed, like pieces of a puzzle that could piece together the truth. John headed back to the tank, fear throbbing in his temples, but curiosity was stronger. And somewhere outside the city, in the dark fog, stood an old sawmill. Its walls breathed of mold and cold, and the silence seemed deaf and heavy. The locals said that the worker Steve had disappeared a few days ago. To others it sounded like a drunken adventure, but the young scouts' hearts clenched with foreboding. The path to the sawmill was difficult and wild. Every rustle was frightening, and the gaze darted among the dark trees. On the way, the students froze in fear when they saw a wild deer. But they quickly realized that it posed no threat. It was possible to move on, leaving the anxiety behind. Still, the search for the local resident continued. It was necessary to move on. But the sight of a wild deer was frightening to the bone. The eyes burned with a crimson-red fire, unnatural and evil. It seemed that something dark and hostile had settled within this creature. Finally, the students entered the workshop of worker Steve. Inside, it smelled of stale alcohol and hopelessness. They found Steve slumped on the floor, sleeping in a stinking fog of his own oblivion. But suddenly this peace was broken by movement. The air smelled of blood and death. The body that seemed drunk turned out to be cursed. The flesh rotted, the teeth gnashed, and there was nothing human left in the eyes. Panic ripped through hearts. One of the boys was wounded in the neck, blood gushing out in a torrent, as if from a burst dam. With trembling hands they clutched the wound, trying to stop death. Their legs no longer felt the weight of the body, only yearning to carry their friend back to the city. The only thought racing through their minds was, what else lay ahead in the darkness? And would they have enough strength to make it to morning? His gaze fell on the deer lying by the road, the same one that had been hit by the bus. The students couldn't believe their eyes. It was no longer an ordinary beast. Something ugly and distorted with hatred. Arrows flew from bows, cutting through the darkness. Everyone knew that if this beast lunged first, no one would survive. The girl, clutching her bow, took a step forward. Her breathing became labored, her fingers trembling with tension. 1, 2, 3. The arrow hit, but the deer only shook its head. She fired again and again. Her movements were quick, almost desperate. When the arrows ran out, the girl grabbed the chainsaw. Her heart was beating so loudly that it seemed even the enemy could hear it. The stag was not just strong, it was imbued with a black fierce power. Its antlers gleamed with a cold, steely gleam. A desperate question flickered in the students' eyes. What kind of creature is this? But they did not stop. Arrows flew one after another. In response, the monster only glared at them with eyes full of purple hatred. He was like a stone, like a shadow from a nightmare. Even wounded, he didn't fall. Someone whispered, "This is a high-ranking monster. They better run." But one of the students was clutching the wounded spot. Blood dripped onto the ground, staining the dust dark red, and the monster remained there, like a guard who wouldn't let them out alive. Somewhere nearby in the Guanyuan reservoir, the water was receding rapidly. There were no monsters to be seen there. John insisted. We had to dry everything to the bottom. Helicopters flew, checking every scrap, examining the bones. But the monster in question was never found. The police just shrugged their shoulders. Maybe they went with the flow, John said. But when the water disappeared, they would have nowhere to go. The police promised to keep an eye on the tank. They were concerned about something else, the mountain of bones at the bottom. The bones had to be removed so that no one would slip on the rotten water. There would be enough work for a week. Evening came. The elder prepared dinner, but not everyone had a chance to eat. Elizabeth remained to guard the territory, her gaze fading with tired determination. But she had no intention of retreating. John thanked her, and she just shrugged. It was more important that the others sleep peacefully. Meanwhile, the witness had not yet woken up. John was going to visit him later. A local resident walked towards the house. He went in, greeted them, sat down, and waited for the woman, Brother Van's widow, to take a bath. There was a strange tension in the air. The woman was warily silent. The man spoke softly, as if afraid someone would hear. He remembered the night he had heard her scream by the tank. The woman was embarrassed, trying to brush it away. But the man did not back down. There was something disturbing, sinister in his voice. He began to press her, saying he knew her secret. Her fear was mixed with rage. Step by step she retreated, and his words became more and more frank. Her breathing became heavier, as if before a storm. Suddenly the woman changed. A cold light flashed in her eyes. She stopped running. Her voice became calm, almost gentle, and then tentacles tore from her body. The man didn't even have time to scream. Silence fell over the house again. And in the darkness, another, even more terrible shadow slowly grew. She still liked the scream. There was something eerily beautiful in that sharp, wild note. The city knew about the restaurant's owner, Josephine, the wife of the fisherman Wang Zhong. Her dishes were enchanting. The aromas were mind-blowing. Even residents of neighboring cities came to taste them. Wang Zhong sometimes wondered how he was so lucky. During the day, he would exhaust himself at sea, and in the evening he would return home, where warmth and prosperity, earned by his hard-working wife, awaited him. But something went wrong. Josephine disappeared from sight. The restaurant was closed. And when the doors did open, the guests were struck by a pale, pathetic meal. People cursed, and memories of the former deliciousness became more and more ghostly. About 10 days passed, and a silent anxiety enveloped the city. The atmosphere was getting thicker. The one-eyed man in the forest wouldn't pick ripe fruit. The girl in the shop mixed up her change, and the group of card players wouldn't disperse even under the snow. And surprisingly, no one could win at them. He left, leaving the interlocutor alone with his thoughts. But the silence did not bring peace. Where had Nick disappeared? The house was empty instead of his presence. Josephine said that Nick was with her. He said that he was afraid of being alone, couldn't sleep, and came to her. He moved toward the far room. The smell of food weighed on his senses like a fog that prevented his mind from moving forward. When John threw off the blanket, his heart sank. It wasn't Nick sitting before him, but something else. Something that only pretended to be human. Memories of the tank flashed through his mind, the same beast from the water. But the creature scornfully brushed aside his fear. She looked at people as if they were savages, and her words carried a cold, almost inhuman contempt. John trembled with disgust. It all seemed crazy, but the fear was real, sticky, alive. The animal's skin hid Josephine's perfect likeness. She even cooked the same way. The smell of chicken stew was faint, but terribly familiar. The monster was proud of its art of mimicry, repeating gestures, intonations, smiles. There was almost no one left who would doubt it. But still, something wouldn't give in. There was a mystery lurking in the darkness that even the best mask couldn't destroy. And so she, this non-human in Josephine's body, wanted to find out. Something very important. Something that would reveal to her the last secret that was missing to become perfect. Josephine had been cooking recently, but something was very wrong. John felt it instantly, like an invisible alarm bell in his heart. She listened intently to her own feelings. The taste of the dish did not match her expectations. The recipe was impeccable, but the result belied all the effort, leaving a bitter taste of disappointment. She didn't just repeat the steps. She absorbed them with her soul. She learned by touch, smell, and taste. But it was all in vain. Her dream of opening her own restaurant faded with each failure. Desperation drove her to a cruel step. She killed one, throwing his body into a cold tank, a silent witness to her ruthlessness. Josephine knew that to show weakness was to lose. Her true nature was a monster living beyond the bounds of humanity. The laughter that cut through the silence was cold and bitter, like butter on a hot frying pan. She knew how to be tough so that the meat would be tender, but the price was too high. Josephine looked at the living beings who had once considered her family, but she understood that it was only an illusion. Everyone would die sooner or later, and she was the one who decided their fate. Good remained a foreign concept, and evil was her blood. The bones in the tank were silent, but one could read the fear that reigned before death. John saw her only as a predator, feeding on other people's weaknesses. He didn't notice a drop of kindness in her actions, only icy calculation and cruel will. Josephine gradually began to change her perspective from human to ugly. She craved John's blood here and now. Her partner threw predatory tentacles at the boy. The creature's eyes were empty, like a zombie's. All that remained in my mind was a burning thirst for revenge and blood. The shadow of the tentacles enveloped the space. Then John grabbed the blue stone, a source of power capable of turning the tide of battle. Powerful energy was bubbling inside the stone. He felt warmth coursing through his veins, preparing for the blow. Everything around was frozen in ice, born from the power of stone. The cold ran through cracks in the ground, fettering the enemy's movements. John stood amidst the icy chaos, ready to strike. Suddenly, a goddess appeared from the cold mist, merging with him into one whole. Her power filled John like the flow of an icy river. Together they became the only weapon against the darkness. This was a war for life, where a mistake cost death. They had no right to retreat. The hunters gathered their strength, preparing to confront the monster woman. The infection crept in silently, like a shadow absorbing the light. John had his hopes set on the school president. She clearly had the strength to defeat the enemy. The boy disappeared into the tall grass near Wang Jun and Nick's house. They say that field doesn't like visitors. It's better not to go there even during the day. According to calculations, the probability of Wang Jun and Nick's wives being infected was too high. This is no longer just a rumor. At first, everyone believed that these creatures only lived in the city reservoir, but the truth turned out to be more horrifying. These worms were real bloodsuckers. 5 stages of horrific transformation: dormant form, parasitosis, trogocytosis, phagocytosis, and finally complete assimilation. Death itself under the skin. John's breathing grew heavier with each step. There was something about the news that cut to his bones. There was only one thing pounding in my head. I had to run. Run as far away from their house as possible. He hurriedly called the professor, begging him to put him in touch with the Hunters Association. Time was running out. John gritted his teeth as he pressed the communication button, but all he heard in response was a ragged crackle. A dull anxiety gripped my chest because somewhere out there, behind this dead silence, there should have been a hello, but instead there was nothing but emptiness. His hands were shaking with rage and fear. He called on the organization to convene a student council, but the words melted into the ether like smoke. Reason told me one thing. This was no coincidence. A parasite lurking in the shadows had destroyed the towers, depriving them of the ability to warn others. The group of students moved forward, quietly discussing the monster's vulnerabilities in order to stay ahead of the danger. Suddenly, a zombie appeared on the path, clutching a rusty axe tightly in his hands. The bull-shaped monster had appeared a minute earlier and had already managed to inflict damage on the students. That arrow from one of the students destroyed the scoundrel in a flash. In the background, the figure of a wounded student was visible, blood flowing in streams like meltwater. The students were stunned with horror. Even a blow to the head, the most vulnerable spot, did not stop the monster. It continued to attack fiercely. It was feeding on the flesh of a wounded student, and it was horrible. The help was useless. The comrade was no longer breathing. His soul had left his body. Only cold and silence remained. The students ran away. It was dangerous to stay there. But they were stopped by a mutated deer, one that wouldn't let go of its prey so quickly. The administrator raised her bow, drew her arrows, and aimed them straight at the monster, determination shining in her eyes. The enemy was briefly eliminated, which gave the students an opportunity to escape. The students did not understand the situation and why they became victims of the situation. The zombies continued to attack. The human-like monster moved forward again, clutching an axe. Its steps were heavy like the beating of a drum. The girl took out her bow again and began to attack the enemy. The students panicked. The zombie turned out to be too strong. The deer, with a blazing gaze, was already racing after them, and their weapons had run out, leaving them defenseless. One of the students urged part of the group to flee to the city. He himself remained, ready to take on the enemy. Determination and fear mingled in his eyes. The boy grabbed a piece of iron that looked like an airplane and threw it at the zombie with all his strength. The metal crashed into the monster with a loud clang. A light crack sounded in the air, a sign of impact. The monster was thrown back by such a strong force. The boy rushed to distract the creatures who were mercilessly attacking again. The monster was bursting with rage. Its image was frightening, and streams of light shimmered in black and red colors like a dance of death. Rage tore the monster apart from within, like a flame fanned by the wind. All of the students' blows passed powerlessly through the monster, like water pouring through a leaky sieve. Confused, he realized that escape was the only salvation. Without looking back, he rushed forward, guided only by instinct. The monsters instantly gave chase. Their thirst for prey was insatiable. They weren't going to let their prey go just like that. Every step the boy took was like a sentence in this deadly game. In the background, a student could be seen deftly running away from monsters. He jumped from branch to branch with such agility that it seemed almost impossible to catch him. A mutated deer raced behind him, its eyes burning with rage, and its bloodthirsty mouth seeking only one thing: the boy. John was frantically looking for electricity. He urgently needed to get through to the organization. The guy ordered the local to inform everyone that the monsters were coming, and they needed to hide urgently. The old man pointed to the elders' hall. There was a shelter where you could hide from the threat. To have time to warn everyone, Grandpa got into the car and drove off. John entered and met the gaze of a strange woman, hungry thirst burning in her eyes. But this was no ordinary woman. This was a zombie hiding behind a human form. It couldn't get enough of the chicken, so it pounced on John, who was the better prey. Her movements were lightning fast, but there was something disturbing and unnatural about her. With the goddess's voice came a warning. She was not alone in the darkness. Several more infected were slowly losing their humanity, becoming zombies. The parasite woman aimed at John, a thick sense of anxiety emanating from her. Suddenly, a cry was heard that sounded like a human's. Many monsters knew how to imitate voices. The city was already teeming with infected people. One by one, the zombies attacked John. But the boy skillfully turned away from the attackers. The zombies grabbed everything they could get their hands on, chainsaws, sticks, anything that could become a weapon. John was a tough nut to crack. The blows went right through him, only wearing him down a little. One by one, the opponents fell into the abyss, as if disappearing into boundless darkness. The female parasite was alive, albeit at a low level. I wonder how she managed to survive. She attacked from behind, sinking her fangs into John's neck, forcing him to struggle. The zombie tore at the boy's body, and horror slowly enveloped everything around. Gathering all his strength, John struck and defeated the monster. The boy instantly ran away, following the advice of the goddess. Finally, all the locals reached the bunker, the only place where there was still hope for survival. John began to discuss the infected with the professor. Their number was growing rapidly. The discussion touched on the bunker's inhabitants. Perhaps some of them were already infected. After all, monsters skillfully imitate human voices and movements. It is almost impossible to distinguish between them. Grandpa suggested, "Today is the three-night dinner in honor of the dead, so the monsters are those who don't know about this tradition." Not all the monsters acted the same. Only 2 of them were really strong, the rest were getting weaker. The professor was right. Parasites can be divided into 2 generations, the first and second differing in strength and evolution. He explained, the first generation of parasites is almost human, and the second is wild zombies, primitive and cruel, who have not yet completed their evolution. A multitude of bloodthirsty second-generation zombies roamed the city, a real and deadly threat. 2 first-generation parasites have been found. All that remains is to find the third among them. Zombies began to break into the bunker, the threat growing closer with every minute. People were panicking, their hearts beating faster because the zombies were already nearby. A quick rescue plan was needed. Time was running out, and danger was approaching.